This lady wakes up after a bus crash and somehow ends up trapped in some lame fantasy web novel, reborn 20 years before the story even kicks off. She's Princess Urenica of some tiny Amon kingdom nobody cares about, acting like she's about to save the world when all she's really doing is scrambling to fix her own hot mess. Like you sinking hours trying to find that OP manhwa recap channel, but still never hitting subscribe. Now she's stuck scheming to marry the dude, hoping to dodge death and some magical drama. So she just tosses out this marry me father nonsense to save her. Stick around, we have one story to tell you. I know you guys must be wondering why we have another long intro. Hit that like button if you want to skip it. We'll cut out the intros once the video hits 1,000 likes. Princess Urenica of Levnne, held hostage by the powerful nation of Bellacort, waits anxiously for Ureion, the king of Bellacort. When he arrives and addresses her as princess, she runs toward him eagerly and tells him she's been waiting for him. Then, in a slip of the tongue, she mistakenly refers to Dekalb's father as the king. He looks at her, puzzled, and asks, "Who's what?" Realizing her mistake, she mutters to herself, calling her mouth stupid. Seeing that he doesn't seem angry, she quickly corrects herself by saying, "Your Majesty," and then, gathering her courage, boldly asks him to marry her. The king, stunned, says her name in disbelief. Sniffling and hopeful, she answers yes, but he clarifies that he never proposed to her. She replies that she knows that already, and when he asks why she's bringing it up, she blushes and tells him it's because she's totally in love with him ever since she first saw him. He rejects her, saying he doesn't love her and reminds her that he's engaged. She laughs and points out that he says she isn't his fiancée. He agrees, admitting that it's more accurate to call her a future candidate. Urenica thinks to herself that she already knows that and wonders who he thinks he's fooling. She agrees that the future is uncertain, then asks if he loves Lady Elodia. He admits he can't really say he does, so she asks why he won't give her a chance, and he asks in return if there's a reason he should. She replies that it's because she likes him. He questions whether that's really true, which shocks her. She wonders what more he wants, since she says she likes and even loves him. Trying a different approach, she tells him that if he marries her, he'll gain far more than if he marries Lady Elodia. When he asks for an example, she says she holds the title for Lvovne's western region, the country's breadbasket, known as the land blessed by the goddess. He counters that Bellacort has plenty of fertile lands. She adds that her father would give him an irresistible dowry and open up Glukman Road immediately. He replies that he suspects her father will open the road soon anyway. Even without the marriage, Urenica feels defeated and in despair. Moments like this make her painfully aware of how small her country really is. If only he understood her true reasons, he would accept her proposal instantly. She's trying to save him. If he marries Lady Elodia, a terrible villain will be born. That woman will raise his son to embrace dark magic, and when the son turns 40, he'll kill his own father. Clenching her fists, Urenica worries that if she says any of that aloud, he'll interrogate her or think she's gone mad. Though reluctant, she steels herself and asks if he doesn't find her pretty. He replies that he doesn't know and isn't sure, leaving her shocked. She wonders what that even means. The king laughs a little and says he's never received a proposal like hers before, calling it refreshing. But still, he tells her he has no plans to marry her. He's not someone who marries without love. Urenica is stunned and fuming. He just said he doesn't love Lady Elodia. Then he adds that he wants to try loving Elodia the best he can. Urenica can hardly believe what she's hearing. He tells her he'll send her back to Lvovne once her father opens Glukman Road, wishes her a good day, and walks away. Left trembling, Urenica vows not to give up. There's a reason she's trying so hard. She was transported into the world of a web novel she had been reading 20 years before the main story. She's trying to stop the villain's birth and the tragedies to come. She's also trying to save herself. Her character is destined to die within 5 years from magic. The only one who can save her is King Ureion, but he just rejected her. Life's full of wild twists like that, except if you don't want to end up like Urenica, stuck begging for a second chance, maybe hit subscribe already. Just saying. Urenica asks Teresia what she plans to name her baby and guesses that Duke Levnne has already picked a name. Teresia thinks for a moment and replies that it's Brigitte. At that, Urenica coughs and says the name is pretty, blushing slightly. When Teresia asks if it doesn't sound nice, Urenica quickly agrees, saying it's totally cute. In that instant, everything clicks for Urenica. This confirms it. She really is inside the world of Bridget Wants to be happy, the web novel she is reading right before she dies. After all, Teresia Teresia is now carrying the story's main character. Urenica's thoughts flash back to 8 months ago, when she first wakes up in this unfamiliar body. The moment she opens her eyes, she sees pale, snow-white skin, soft light pink hair like cotton candy, and pale blue eyes. She is stunned, thinking she is incredibly beautiful, and even asks her reflection in the mirror if this is really her. But as she tries speaking, her words come out sounding strange, as though they are in a different language. Still trying to make sense of what is happening, she is suddenly interrupted when Teresia barges in, asking urgently if she is all right. Caught off guard, Urenica is momentarily stunned again, this time by Teresia's overwhelming beauty. Before she can even respond, maids rush in calling her, shocking her even further, especially since she hasn't yet realized her new identity. Teresia says she hears her scream and is worried, asking if she is sick, calling her Yenny and telling her not to look at her like a stranger. Still dazed, Urenica responds in a confused tone and meets her supposed sister for the first time. Glancing around at the maids, she wonders if those are actual maid costumes. As Teresia asks again what is wrong, Urenica replies that it is nothing, though it is clear she is overwhelmed and lost. She silently questions where she is and who Teresia really is. The room falls into stunned silence. The maids immediately assume she has lost her memory, and chaos breaks out. One maid screams for someone to call the king or the royal physician and shouts to the majesty that the princess has forgotten everything. Teresia turns to Urenica desperately, asking what she is saying. A few minutes later, their mother and father rush in, crying. Urenica's mother asks if Urenica doesn't recognize her own mother. At that, Urenica's mind reels, flashing back to her previous life and the voices that haunt her, voices that say no one wants her, that everyone has their own families to care for. She thinks about what is happening now. People have suddenly appeared, claiming to be her parents, but in truth, she never has anyone she can really call family. She wonders again where she is and how she ends up here. Her memories return. She is on a bus, sitting by the window, reading that same web novel when the bus suddenly lurches. There is a loud crash, and the next thing she knows, she wakes up here. In a way, she is grateful to still be alive, even if she is now in a completely different world. And more than that, she is now a princess, and a pretty one at that. Still, something about it all feels off. There is a strange sense of déjà vu, and even though this place should be unfamiliar, it feels oddly recognizable, like she's heard of it before. As she drifts into thought, a guard enters the room and bows, introducing himself as Fernando Cardona, her personal guard. She blinks, asks him to repeat his name, and he respectfully replies, Fernando Cardona, calling her Royal Highness. At that, her thoughts stir again. That name? It is definitely familiar. She remembers reading it somewhere. Thinking it over, she shrugs it off with a nervous laugh, telling herself it can't be, that her imagination is just going wild. Fernando tilts his head, confused, and asks if something is wrong. She says it is nothing, just her thoughts running off. Still, she can't shake the feeling. She remembers that name for sure. Then it hits her that it is from the web novel. She asks him if he has a son or a brother, trying to confirm her suspicion. There is only one person she can recall with that name, Cardona, the male protagonist of Bridget Wants to Be Happy, the heart-stoppingly handsome knight, Alexio Lazaro Cardona. Fernando replies that he isn't married, has no children, and is an only child. Urenica's thoughts race. The words, the names, the people, they all make sense now. Everything feels familiar because it all is familiar. She realizes she really has been transported into the web novel and is now living in the story before the main characters are even born. As her thoughts swirl, Fernando looks at her with concern and asks if she is all right. That is when it strikes her hard. She suddenly remembers that the novel begins with her sister Teresia being kidnapped while pregnant. That's right. And unluckily for her, she has somehow managed to land in this world right at the moment when all the future misfortunes are about to begin. After realizing she is inside the world of the novel, Urenica thinks the entire situation is completely ridiculous, utterly insane, and makes absolutely no sense, wondering how on earth she ended up in someone else's body. Yet, strangely enough, it begins to feel as though everything is finally falling into place. On the continent of Rhaegar lies a powerful neighboring nation that could easily crush her small country, Bellacort, the powerhouse of the East. In the original story, It is none other than the mighty King of Bellacort, who kidnaps her older sister Teresia, invades Levnne, abducts her, and holds her captive. The thought alone makes her shudder. It's truly awful. Yet, in the novel, he is somehow portrayed as a tragic figure readers are meant to sympathize with, because he eventually dies a heartbreaking death. Remembering this, Urenica suddenly begins to sob, recalling how she once cried her eyes out when he died. Unable to believe the author could take him away like that. Though she pities him deeply, she still fears him, uncertain whether it's because he rules such a formidable nation or because a fictional character has now become a real and terrifying person. Teresia's kidnapping marks the beginning of the novel and the catalyst for all the disasters that befall the previous generation. The story itself is an intense but tender love tale between a princess and her devoted guard. The web novel, Bridget Wants to Be Happy, revolves around three central characters: Bridget, daughter of Princess Urenica of Levnne, Alexio, her loyal guard and the male lead, and the main antagonist, the tyrannical King Ureion of Bellacort. The plot follows Bridget and Alexio as they heal the wounds of their scarred childhoods. In short, the prior generation is doomed, not just cursed with bad luck, but with early and inevitable deaths. From the moment the kidnapping begins, the path to tragedy is set in motion. Bridget's father, Duke Levnne, dies in battle trying to rescue his pregnant wife. Teresia, far from home, collapses in shock after hearing the news, which triggers Bridget's premature birth. As negotiations between Bellacort and Levnne collapse, Bridget and Teresia are sent home. When Bridget turns 10, Ureion, devastated by her departure, turns to black magic. By age 11, he kills his own father, the King of Bellacort, through a ritual in order to become king, and begins a war to reclaim Bridget. Despite feeling sympathy for Ureion's father, Urenica is still terrified of him. Teresia later succumbs to a plague just 2 years after returning home. That makes 3 deaths already: Teresia, Duke Levnne, and the King of Bellacort. And then comes Fernando, Alexio's father, who loses an eye and a leg during the war. One tragedy after another shatters the previous generation's lives. In contrast, the novel itself is presented as a heartwarming coming-of-age romance about recovery and love. But now that Urenica is living inside that story, none of it feels like mere backstory anymore. It all feels terrifyingly real. She clings to the hope that this might be a dream, thinking she could be in denial, lying in a coma from an accident, or maybe even abducted by aliens. At first, she completely rejects the idea that this could be real, but eventually, she can't escape the truth. She's living a second life. And with Teresia already far along in her pregnancy, Bellacort's invasion could begin at any moment. She turns to Teresia and stares, prompting her sister to ask why she's looking at her like that. Startled, Urenica responds that it's nothing. Teresia says she's making her feel self-conscious, but Urenica simply says it's just hard to believe that little Bridget will be born soon. Later, she makes a firm resolution, not to sit back and do nothing. She tells herself that if anyone can change the course of events, it's her. Since she already knows everything about the story, she decides she will do whatever it takes to stop the tragedies before they unfold. Her first attempt, Plan A, stop Bellacort from invading Levnne. She begins analyzing cause and effect, asking why the invasion even happens in the first place, only to realize that she doesn't know the answer. It's frustrating. After all, the novel barely focused on the parents' generation. All she remembers is that Levnne refuses to fulfill the terms of some agreement, which enrages the King of Bellacort. But what is that agreement? She seems to have no idea. As she's lost in thought, Fernando approaches and asks if something is wrong, noting that she looks unwell. She casually replies that she's just worried about his right leg and left eye. Confused, he asks her what she means, and she waves it off, saying it's nothing. Still, she presses further and asks if Levnne and Bellacort have signed any treaties or agreements. Fernando replies that if she's referring to Bellacort, she must be talking about the Gluckman Treaty. Urenica's eyes widen as she echoes the name to herself, wondering if that's really the agreement at the center of it all, the Gluckman Treaty. She then asks if he means the Gluckman Treaty, and Fernando explains that, in exchange for Levnne opening access to Gluckman Road, Bellacort has agreed to supply them with magical ore from Azekian. Hearing that, Urenica's memory jolts. She remembers reading about the Big Gluckman Treaty in the original novel, when the characters discuss past political tensions between the two nations. That's it. Just like you might remember, you can hit like and share this with your friends if you're digging the video. Don't leave it hanging, show some love. Alright, coming back to the story. That's the event that started it all. She pauses, her thoughts spinning, realizing that the King of Levnne, now her father, was the one who broke the treaty first. A bold and reckless move coming from the ruler of a small, vulnerable nation. Determined, she concludes that she finally understands the cause of everything and just needs to ensure her father upholds the treaty to prevent war. With new resolve, she dashes off, and Fernando, confused and concerned, calls after her, stammering her name and addressing her as Princess Urenica. But she doesn't stop. Her steps are firm, her mind made up. She thinks she has no choice now but to become the hidden hero who saves the kingdom. Bursting into the room where her father sits, she calls out to him. He greets her warmly, asking why she's come running. Without hesitation, she stomps over and brings up the Gluckman Treaty, startling him. Realizing her tone is too aggressive, she quickly changes strategy, softening her voice and calling him affectionately. He smiles, calling her his sweetheart. She tries again, gently mentioning the treaty, but he brushes her off with a casual dismissal, saying there's no need for her to trouble her pretty little head with such complicated matters. It'll only give her a headache. Shocked by his condescension, Urenica asks if he's planning something shady. He raises an eyebrow, questioning what she means, but in that moment, it all becomes clear. Her blood runs cold as the truth hits her, and she lets out a horrified scream, leaving her father completely dumbfounded. 3 hours later, after a long confrontation, she still can't believe what she's heard. Her father has kept Gluckman Road closed for 2 whole years. Looking away and clearing his throat, he admits it, explaining that Bellacort doesn't produce magical ore themselves and relies on trade with Azikian for national defense and energy in their capital. That's why they need access to Gluckman Road. It's the fastest and safest route. However, when a major ore deposit was discovered in Azikian, her father saw an opportunity. He grew greedy, changed the treaty terms unilaterally, and demanded not just fixed compensation but 10% of all ore traded. Furious, Urenica mentally scolds him, calling him a total bully. Levnne had always received 100 units of ore, but now he suddenly wants 1,000. Without warning, she asks if he isn't worried about retaliation. He shrugs, saying Bellacort won't risk war because of the Riger peace treaty. But Urenica realizes that's exactly why Bellacort, the so-called peacekeeper of the continent, is losing patience. At her wit's end, she asks once more if he really has no intention of reopening Gluckman Road. He simply smiles and says there's no reason to. She storms out, fuming, wondering if he's even serious and feeling like she's already failed before she's truly begun. Later, while walking in the palace gardens, she seethes quietly. Teresia, noticing her frustration, gently asks if something is wrong. Urenica tries to brush it off, saying it's nothing, but Teresia isn't convinced. She insists that if something is troubling her, she should share it. Urenica replies again that it's nothing, not wanting to burden Teresia during her pregnancy, but Teresia reassures her that she can always count on her big sister, who will do anything for her Yenny. Touched, Urenica thinks Teresia is an angel and squeezes her hand, promising instead that she will protect her, that nothing will ever happen to her. Since Plan A has clearly failed, she moves on to Plan B, stopping the King of Bellacort from abducting Teresia. If she can't prevent the invasion itself, she can at least stop the kidnapping. However, she can't remember the exact date Bellacort invades. With no time to lose, she rushes to Duke Levnne's castle to find his younger brother, Sergei Levnne, her childhood friend. Sergei is surprised to see her and asks what she's doing there, wondering aloud why she isn't at the palace. She doesn't answer, too absorbed in thought. With a smirk, he sarcastically says he doubts there's much going on in her mind anyway. Still, Urenica knows the only way to protect Teresia is to stay close and prepare. A few days earlier, she tried hard to recall the invasion date, but it kept slipping away. She knows Teresia can't remain at the palace forever. She's a married woman after all. Sergei sighs and mutters that Urenica hasn't been ladylike lately and has been acting strangely for months, even wondering how she can still be considered a princess. She tells him to shut up or she'll make him, and since her personality aligns with that of the original Urenica, no one suspects a thing. Looking at Sergei seriously, she tells him to promise that he'll save her when the time comes. He asks why, and she giggles, saying he just will. The moment mirrors the novel's first scene, where he urges her to leave and she asks about Teresia. Her plan now is simple. Hide Teresia somewhere safe. She has to hide too, but if anything goes wrong, she'll count on Sergei. He rolls his eyes, saying she's acting weird again. But there's one thing she's forgotten in her frantic planning. Teresia isn't the only princess of Levnne. Back at the palace, Urenica's mother asks what the royal physician has said, dead, and Teresia replies that there is nothing to worry about. Urenica's mother is relieved and says it is good to hear. While they talk, Urenica feels increasingly anxious. A strange feeling creeps over her, and something feels off. She wonders what the bad feeling is and thinks maybe she is just tense from the past few days, but the uneasiness only grows. No matter how hard she tries to ignore it, her heart keeps racing. She thinks she is just nervous, but something about today makes her even more uneasy, and she can't calm down. As she is lost in thought, her father tells Teresia to look at and listen to nice things for the baby. Teresia smiles and says of course she will. Suddenly, Urenica jumps up and says she needs to do something. Grabbing Teresia's arm, she tells her they should go back inside, saying she shouldn't be out too long. Teresia protests, saying it has only been 2 hours, but Urenica insists that 2 hours is enough. Their parents look surprised, and her father asks what is wrong. Urenica explains that Teresia gets tired easily when outside too long and tells her to go back home. Teresia's mother grows concerned, thinking she isn't feeling well. As they leave, Urenica waves and tells everyone to stay in the palace and promise not to leave. Her father tells her to get home safely as she hurries away. Suddenly, they hear a voice calling out to find her. Confused, Urenica wonders what is going on. Then the sound of marching soldiers follows, and a guard shouts that they are under attack. Urenica wonders if it is the Bellacort army and jokes to herself that she should consider becoming a fortune teller. Her heart pounds harder. Teresia asks nervously what is happening. Urenica tells her there is no time and pulls her along. Teresia calls for her parents, but Urenica assures her they'll be fine, remembering that in the story, nothing happens to them and King Ureion just takes Teresia. They reach the hidden passage, and Urenica peeks around the corner before pointing to the floor and quickly explaining that this is the secret passage Bridget finds as a child. Showing Teresia the way, Urenica points out the small knob on the floor and explains that when the soldiers come in, she should press it to slide down to the basement. As Teresia steps inside, she calls Urenica's name, but Urenica firmly tells her to stay in there and not come out. With tears in her eyes, Teresia asks for an explanation, but Urenica knows they can't both fit in the passage and decides she has to find the second secret one. As she closes it, she tells Teresia to focus on Bridget for now. Teresia calls her name once more as Urenica pushes her inside. Urenica knows she has to move fast before the soldiers arrive. Peeking through a gap, she sighs in relief, whispering that Teresia is safe now and that she'll see her soon. Teresia cries silently. The sound of swords clashing fills the halls, and Urenica panics, realizing the soldiers are already inside. Hiding behind the pillars, she thinks about going to the east wing, where the second secret passage is. She hesitates, wondering if she should wait for Sergei instead, but then she remembers that Sergei won't know where she is and can't help. Deviating from the story means she can't rely on the novel's original events anymore. She cries but makes up her mind. It isn't that far, so she should run for it. Wiping her tears, she cautiously moves forward, thinking no one is around. As she slips from pillar to pillar, she suddenly freezes. Someone is watching her. A sharp gaze follows her every move and she holds her breath, terrified. The person walks closer and she sits down, trembling behind the pillar, silently praying he'll walk past. She wishes Sergei would show up now and even promises him 100 kisses if he does. As the figure approaches, they lock eyes. Standing before her is a man with shiny silver hair and amused red bedroom eyes. Looking at her pink hair and blue eyes, he smirks and says he has found her, Princess Urenica of Levnne. Her heart drops as she realizes it is the King of Bellacort and curses Sergei for not saving her. Urenica thinks desperately, but it is too late, since the King of Bellacort abducts her and lifts her onto his shoulder. As he starts walking, she realizes with dread that she is truly screwed, wondering why the ground is now above her head and the sky below her feet. Trying to distract herself, she begins counting bricks. 1 brick, 2 bricks. Meanwhile, behind them, soldiers catch sight of the king carrying her and shout for him to unhand the princess, calling him a brute. They rush to attack, but the King of Bellacort kicks one aside, while his own soldiers hold off the rest, calling them a nuisance. Urenica's stomach twists with pain. She thinks bitterly that she wanted to stop Teresia's abduction, not become the one being taken. Just then, Sergei appears, running toward them and calling out her name. Seeing him, Urenica yells back, demanding what took him so long and calling him a big jerk. Meanwhile, Ureion continues fending off soldiers while carrying her effortlessly. Sniffling, Urenica tries to stay calm and politely asks Mr. Bellacort if he can put her down. He asks if she wants him to let her go, and she shouts back that she she isn't even asking for that, just to be put down properly. She insists she can walk on her own, or at least be held upright, because it really hurts, especially his armor. Finally, Ureion sets her down, but onto a horse. She freezes in shock, hitting her head against the horse's neck and panicking as she begs to be taken off, saying she is scared. Ureion hushes the horse and tells her to keep her back straight and lean against him. Hesitantly, she follows his instructions and asks if she is doing it right, to which he replies yes. Then, turning to his soldiers, he gives the command for the army of Bellacort to ride. The horse rears slightly before galloping off. He tells them they will pass through a magic circle and warns not to fall behind. At that, Urenica, startled, wonders what kind of magic circle he means until she sees it. It is bright, blindingly so, and she cries out that her eyes hurt. Immediately, Ureion gently covers her eyes with his hand and gives a firm order not to stop until they are on Bellacort soil. Some time passes, and eventually Urenica loses consciousness. Later, she wakes up, barely registering voices as Ureion speaks with a mage, who says he hadn't expected her body to react so strongly to magic. Ureion asks if that means he can't wake her up. Hearing the noise, Urenica groggily thinks it is all too loud. Her eyes flutter open, and the first thing she sees is Ureion looking down at her. He says she is awake. She looks at him and murmurs that a hot guy talked to her, thinking vaguely, that is kind of nice. Ureion calls her princess and turns to the mage, asking if something is seriously wrong with her. The mage replies he will examine her. Sitting beside her, he politely asks her to pardon him, then activates a magic circle on his palm. Suddenly, Urenica feels nauseous. As he reaches out, he tells her it will take just a moment. She wonders if she is getting motion sickness and a headache too, but then, as his hand touches her head, a jolt of sharp pain surges through her skull. It feels like her head will explode. It hurts. It is torture. She struggles in pain, desperately reaching out for anyone, silently begging to be saved. Then, her fingers brush against something, someone's foot, and just like that, the pain vanishes. Stunned, she questions whether it has really disappeared. She looks again and sees that it is Ureion's foot. He is watching her with genuine worry and asks softly if she is all right. Through Urenica's sobs, she says she is fine and then suddenly shouts in frustration. She thinks back to how she has been on high alert for days to protect Theresia, only to end up kidnapped, tossed around like a sack, and then forced to ride a galloping horse even though she's never ridden one before. After that, she suffers a pain unlike anything she's ever felt. Still, even if she had known all this would happen, she would have done it all again, which makes it even sadder. Ureion calls her name, and she cries that he is mean and it is all terrible. She questions why, if he can't get Theresia, he doesn't just go home instead of taking her. Of all things, she regrets grabbing his foot. Then Ureion picks her up, which startles her, and as she looks at his face, she finds herself thinking how handsome he is. Tears still roll down her cheeks, and Ureion asks why she is so upset. She suddenly realizes her feet aren't touching the ground. He gently sets her down onto a Bellacort flag, wipes her tears, and apologizes, saying he hadn't known she was sensitive to magic and asks if it hurt. She confirms it does. He says the sudden abduction must have been shocking, and she thinks how humiliating it all is. She snatches his handkerchief, saying she'll wipe her tears herself. She tries to understand the strange pain she felt, which is now gone. Ureion asks if she has always been sensitive to magic or ores, and she says she doesn't know, wondering aloud if it is truly magic sensitivity. He asks again, and she shakes her head, saying nothing like this has happened before, though in her mind, before only covers the past 8 months she remembers. Ureion turns to Rolf and asks what has happened. Urenica recalls the moment a man says, "One moment, Your Highness," before touching her, after which the pain gets worse. Rolf explains that if someone is especially sensitive to magic, this kind of reaction can easily occur. When Ureion asks if someone could be unaware, Rolf says maybe, especially if they grow up with little exposure to magic. Asked why she is fine now, Rolf admits he isn't sure and says he'll need to examine her, though touching her seems difficult. Ureion sighs and says he understands, deciding that using a magic circle again is impossible. Standing up, he instructs that since they have now crossed the border, they will continue the journey on horseback. The soldiers agree. He then turns to Urenica and comments that she doesn't seem very used to horse riding. Urenica quickly replies that she can ride a horse, but he notes she looks too scared to say that. She clarifies that she can't ride alone, then thinks to herself how annoying she must be. But then she reminds herself that she is the one who has been kidnapped, but doesn't understand why she is worried about bothering her kidnapper. Then Ureion says she'll be going with him and that if they ride all day, say they'll arrive the day after tomorrow. Urenica thinks to herself that he is being way too kind and considerate for someone who has kidnapped her. In the novel, De Kalb becomes obsessive because of his deep need for love, so she expects his father to be much colder. When Ureion offers his hand to help her up, she takes it and thanks him. She asks if he plans to return her to Lvovne. He doesn't answer right away, and she figures she knows the answer. This is the man who keeps Theresia locked away for 10 years. Then Ureion finally says that once he reaches an agreement with Lvovne, he will return her, and until then, he promises her safety and comfort, swearing it on the name of Bellacort. She thinks how surreal it is to be the only one who knows this man will be killed by his own son before turning 40. He asks for her cooperation. Urenica feels the same sense of responsibility she does with Theresia. He adds that although he doesn't have much to offer, he hopes it doesn't sound like a threat, and if it does, he is sorry. Then it hits her. She doesn't even know his name. She awkwardly tries calling him Miss, Dad, and Father of, until Ureion looks shocked and repeats the word father. Finally, she properly asks for his name. He introduces himself as Ureion Louis Solidor of Bellacort. She introduces herself as Urenica Sofia Lvovne and smiles, saying it is nice to meet him. He replies that the pleasure is his. After that, they begin traveling by horse, and Urenica is tense the entire time. Ureion tells her to relax her body, warning that if she keeps her upper body too stiff, her back will start to hurt. She quickly shouts that it doesn't hurt at all. In her mind, she wonders if he has taken his armor off because she complained earlier. It is slightly more comfortable, but without the armor, their bodies are too close. She can feel his firm muscles through his clothes, and with the horse's movement, she feels everything too clearly. Blushing, she reminds herself she's been single all her life because of her shyness. Mentally 25 years and 8 months old. She looks at his face and wonders if he even sweats because he smells clean and cool, which surprisingly makes her feel better, almost energized. Her breathing grows heavier, and then she suddenly realizes she has no idea she's such a thirsty woman. As she nearly falls, Ureion catches her and tells her to sit still. She quietly replies yes, thinking how incredibly embarrassing it all is. A few hours later, Urenica is lying on the ground in pain. She has only been watching Rolf make a fire and can't understand why it feels like she's dying. As Ureion picks her up, she decides now isn't the time to feel embarrassed about him touching her. Once he holds her, the pain begins to fade. He holds her close and tells Rolf it's strange how sensitive she is. Urenica still trembles as Rolf explains that all he did was start a fire. She realizes this is the third strange reaction, first with the magic circle, then with healing magic, and now the fire. Rolf says she might be someone unadapted to magic. Ureion repeats the term, and Rolf explains that some rare people can't physically or mentally handle magic. Urenica remembers Rolf's earlier point that someone raised without magic exposure might react this way. She figures it makes sense. After all, she isn't originally from this world. She might be in Urenica's body, but she is still Yunsu Su. Ureion tells Rolf to stop using magic, noting even small spells are too much. Urenica wonders why the pain disappears whenever he touches her. Ureion then lifts her and asks if anything like this has ever happened back in Lvovne. Urenica thinks to herself that in the last 8 months, she hasn't even seen a mage until now. Compared to Bellacort, Lvovne is a weak country. Magical ore is only used to protect its borders. Magic users are mostly hired foreigners, and there is no royal mage's tower. None at all. Meanwhile, Bellacort imports large numbers of magic users, has a systematic use of secret black magic, and even has a tower of magic. Her body rejects magic, and that is the kind of kingdom she is being taken to. She thinks it's no joke. She might actually just drop dead. She asks if he can just knock her out instead. Ureion looks confused, so she explains he can hit her lightly on the back of the head, and while she's out, he can get to the palace quickly. He asks if she's serious, and she replies that the pain would be brief and it would be nice to wake up in bed, but he refuses, saying he won't mistreat the royalty of another kingdom. She asks why he has to be such a considerate kidnapper. Then she points out that one soldier has a sliced open arm, another's leg is injured, and since they can't light a fire without magic, they can't eat or heal anyone. She says she can't keep delaying them. If he doesn't want to hit her, he can just use the magic circle again. She'll probably faint from that. He asks, what if something bad happens? And she replies he can just hug her like before. She giggles, insisting to herself that she definitely isn't saying this because she likes him. Ureion sighs, saying it wouldn't be hard, but again refuses. He says they can build a fire manually. She is an unarmed woman who can't wield a sword or hide properly, and those men are seasoned Bellacort soldiers. She can't compare herself to them. Ureion Urenica agrees, but Ureion adds he wants her cooperation, not her sacrifice. He reminds her of his promise to keep her safe and comfortable, and unless she wants to make the master of Bellacort a liar, she should stop. But just in case, he tells her to stay close, since Bellacort's borders are laced with magical ore. Urenica is touched and almost cries. She swears to save him from dying young as Decalb's test subject. Ureion asks why she keeps calling him someone's father. As Urenica sits by the campfire, she assures them they can rely on her. She thinks that the Bellacort is heavier than Levnne and filled with so much magic that she can barely breathe. Yet oddly, being near Ureion helps her breathe easier. She feels certain this man has some kind of miracle cure flowing through him. When Ureion asks if there is any treatment, Rolf, keeping his distance for her safety, says no. Urenica realizes the seriousness of the situation. Rolf explains that most people who can't adjust to magic don't live past their 5th year, and he isn't sure how Urenica has survived so long. Shocked, she blurts out in disbelief, repeating if she heard 5 years correctly. Rolf confirms it and adds that even living far away from magic doesn't help much, since magic exists everywhere, in the ground and the air, making it impossible to fully avoid. Internally, she panics, thinking he is handing her a death sentence while staying calm. Rolf clarifies that she is an exception and has survived into adulthood just fine. She thinks to herself that the original Urenica has been fine until now, and since she has been there for 9 months already, she has about 4 years and 3 months left before hitting the 5-year mark. She says this out loud, and Ureion, concerned, calls her name. She jumps up in panic, thinking this is crazy and that she is terminally ill. Ureion pulls her hand and gently asks her to wait and calm down. Rolf says maybe the divine blood in her body helps counter the effects of magic and suggests this carefully. Ureion agrees that divinity and magic are connected. Urenica remembers that in this world, gods exist and that the Bellacort family, who descend from the god Loris, rule the Holy Empire. Loris is the god of peace and prosperity, making Ureion a literal descendant of a god, almost like their version of Jesus. Rolf adds that, with her divine background, she is safe near Ureion, whose energy likely helps her. Urenica begins to think that his divine power can save her. Rolf suddenly asks if she has been blessed by Loris, which surprises Urenica. Ureion asks if she has been baptized. She thinks about how, in her world, babies from royal families are often blessed before birth and says she probably has been. Ureion repeats her unsure reply, so she quickly corrects herself and says she definitely is, hoping he won't ask for her secret baptismal name. Ureion notes that if she is baptized, it makes sense since Loris is the god of Levnne. Rolf laughs and says maybe she has survived this long because of that blessing. Urenica thinks that Rolf does nothing wrong and that if anyone is at fault, it is her for being an interloper in that world. Urenica says she is relieved to hear that since the capital is on holy ground. Rolf adds that he also thinks that is a good thing. Urenica summarizes to herself that she is a person from another world, so she has no immunity to magic, making her maladjusted to magic. But luckily, Urenica's body is blessed by Loris, so as long as she stays near someone with strong divine energy, she should be all right. Her plan B has been to stop the King of Bellacort from kidnapping Teresia. The plan is almost a success, but she thinks that she has stupidly ended up kidnapped and is absolutely useless since she has unexpectedly found out she is sensitive to magic. She sighs and thinks that her survival is most important, so now isn't the time to be worrying about someone else. She glances around and thinks that she can't believe the supporting character who dies a tragic death in the original novelist, now the person who will save her. As Ureion looks toward her, she mumbles that she guesses Plan C is to ship the side characters together, calling it a win-win. She concludes that life definitely requires a Plan C. She devises Plan C at that moment until she finds a way to exist normally in that body. She needs to stay right next to Ureion, and to prevent Ureion from being murdered by his son must not learn black magic. Since Decalb learns black magic from his mother, to stop Decalb from learning it, she just needs to stop Ureion from marrying that woman in the first place. Then all he has to do is marry her. As she is busy thinking, Ureion calls out to her and she jolts and responds quickly. She looks at him and thinks it seems a little disrespectful to think about that when he is right there in front of her, but considers it perfect. The next day, as they are preparing to leave, Urenica keeps looking at Ureion and thinks about how marrying a kind, handsome man feels like a delusion of grandeur, but it is still nice just thinking about it. Ureion smiles and asks what she is thinking about, and she giggles as she tells him that she is thinking he is pretty hot for a dad. Inwardly, she corrects herself, admitting that she is actually thinking about marrying him. Ureion remains silent, too surprised to respond, and Urenica wonders why he is staring at her like she is some strange creature. Memories flash before her eyes like a slideshow, and she recalls that while he has seen her in some unseemly moments, she doesn't think she has been that much of a pest. But then, she remembers all the embarrassing things she has done and tells herself to stop thinking about it, feeling defeated and full of despair. Looking at her, Ureion comments that she is quite extraordinary. Urenica interprets his words to mean that he finds her very strange and feels a rumble of thunder in her mind from the humiliation, thinking that there is no way he will marry her now. While this might be a matter of life and death for her, she can't understand why the King of Bellacort would marry a princess from a tiny kingdom. Ureion calls her over, and she walks to him formally. He lifts her and places her on the horse, and as she sits down, she thinks she is slowly getting used to this kind of treatment. Afterward, Ureion orders his soldiers to move forward and keep their spirits up, assuring them they will reach the capital that day. The men respond affirmatively. Urenica thinks that even if marrying this man is impossible, she still has to stop him from marrying the dark magician she remembers from the original story. She recalls the novel in which Decalb's mother tells him that he is a monster born of the strongest divine power and the most evil magic, and that if he wants, he can have everything in the world, even the distant world of the gods beyond the Udeta, as long as he desires it. Urenica concludes that she is at fault for Decalb's corruption, having led her son down the path of black magic, and thinks she must have been out of her mind. She then wonders how she can stop this marriage and has a sudden realization, asking herself when Ureion gets married. She knows Brigitte will be born in 2 months, or maybe 3 months now, that Theresia hasn't been kidnapped. Since Brigitte and Alexio are the same age and Decalb is a year younger, she calculates that she has only about a year left to stop the marriage if she is being generous. Hesitantly, she addresses Ureion and asks him a question. He responds, asking what it is. She hesitates again, wondering how to phrase it, and he calls her name once more. She blurts out her question, asking if he is unwed or expecting a child. He reacts in shock, exclaiming at her strange question. In her mind, she acknowledges how ridiculous it sounds. He clarifies that he is not married yet. She questions the word yet, and he continues, saying that he obviously doesn't have a child and is definitely not expecting one. After hearing this, she thinks that being unmarried with no kids is a very good thing, but the word yet gives her a bad feeling. He remarks that she asks peculiar things. Without further delay, they finally arrive in Bellacort. The city appears old and historical, unlike Lvovne, which looks more charming in comparison. She glances all around, and Ureion places a robe over her, saying that the crowd's gaze might be uncomfortable. As she looks at the city, the crowd cheers in support of their king, shouting blessings for Bellacort. Urenica thinks that the crowd is huge and that if it weren't for the cape, she would be completely overwhelmed. She finds him so kind-hearted that she considers him perfect husband material. After reaching the palace, Ureion helps her down from the horse, and she thinks that if she could, she would kidnap him herself and make him her husband, though she admits to herself that she can't really do that, but a girl can imagine. Suddenly, someone runs up to Ureion and expresses great relief that he has returned safely, saying he has no idea how worried he has been. Hearing this, Urenica is surprised. Lady Elodia looks at Ureion and begins speaking with deep emotion, saying she misses him and calling him as Majesty. Her emotional words draw everyone's attention, but Ureion stays calm and distant. The protagonist watches in disbelief, thinking this situation can't be real. Lady Elodia goes on, dramatically saying that she cries every night and asks if he can understand that pain. The protagonist stays silent, admiring Lady Elodia's beauty, thinking she is stunning, with a lovely voice and an enchanting way of speaking. Even as a straight woman, she feels drawn to her and wonders how Ureion could possibly feel, but her thoughts are interrupted when he calmly replies that it has only been 3 days. Lady Elodia isn't discouraged and insists those 3 days have felt like 3 years to her. Ureion still doesn't react much, and the protagonist notices his lack of interest, surprised that he doesn't seem moved by someone so beautiful. She remembers that he once says he might try falling in love, but it doesn't seem like Lady Elodia even matters to him. She thinks it is heartless of him to make such a lovely woman cry without trying to comfort her, and wonders if she should step in, but in the end, she stays quiet. quiet. Lady Elodia presses on, remarking that she might live in the palace one day, so there is no reason she shouldn't be there. She adds that the man who might become her husband has returned and questions who else would come out to greet him. Ureion gives a short, polite response, thanking her. The protagonist's mind races as she processes Lady Elodia's words, wondering what she means by possibly living in the palace and referring to Ureion as the man who might be her husband. She realizes that this beautiful woman is DeKalb's mother and pieces together more clues, thinking that she is the one destined to become Queen of Bellacort and Ureion's wife. This woman, the evil black magician and necromancer who can control corpses and summon souls from hell, is the true nemesis of her parents' generation in the original novel, and she begins to connect the dots about Elodia. Ureion then clarifies that he isn't married yet, but the protagonist misinterprets this as confirmation that he is already betrothed. Her thoughts spiral into despair, concluding that when he says he isn't married yet, he means he is already promised to someone. Lady Elodia softly asks Ureion if he is hurt, while the protagonist reflects bitterly that there is no way she can compete with someone so beautiful, not a chance. She even considers absurd alternatives, such as flirting with the villain's mother to convince her not to teach DeKalb black magic, and labels this desperate strategy as her Plan C, pairing the side characters together as a win-win. The emotional tension escalates when Lady Elodia laments aloud that she doesn't have a handkerchief because all of Ureion's handkerchiefs are already soaked with tears and snot. Ureion shifts the conversation and suggests that it would be best if Lady Elodia returns home, as he can't keep his men standing around any longer and has an important guest to attend to. Lady Elodia appears taken aback but does not give up. Meanwhile, the protagonist notices how Ureion's demeanor remains rigid, realizing that despite his stiffness, he isn't falling for Lady Elodia's charms at all. She compares herself to Lady Elodia and concludes that, considering he doesn't treat Elodia any differently than he treats her, and they are supposedly engaged, her plan definitely doesn't stand a chance. Still lost in thought, she notices Lady Elodia glaring at her. Suddenly, her head begins to spin and her body feels heavy, and she panics, thinking that what she is experiencing feels different from anything she has felt before. Her body feels as if it is sinking into the ground, deep into the ground, and deeper still, into the underworld. The realization hits her that she is being dragged into the underworld, and she questions whether the beautiful woman has done this to her. Before she can make sense of it all, Lady Elodia makes one final plea to Ureion, asking him to promise they will see each other again soon, so she will have something to look forward to while waiting, and she says goodbye until next time. Meanwhile, the protagonist struggles with an overwhelming sensation that feels like the blood is being drained from her body and that she is being pulled down. The guards and onlookers notice her distress and shout her name, calling for the princess and alerting the king. She gasps, unable to breathe, and feels like she is about to die. Ureion steps in and saves her from the brink once again. Looking at him in awe, she thinks that once again, this man has saved her. Yet the presence of Lady Elodia still looms heavily, and someone nearby observes aloud that it looks as though she is being haunted by the damned. The protagonist's thoughts race, finally accepting that the feeling she just has confirms it. Lady Elodia has definitely tried to kill her with black magic. DeKalb's magic is once described in the novel as invisible hands of the damned, able to drag a living person into the underworld, and Urenica can't stop thinking about that as she tries to understand what she might have done to make Solea Elodia angry. Suddenly, Ureion's firm voice breaks the tension as he addresses Lady Elodia directly. She replies calmly, but his voice becomes sharper as he reminds her that speaking carelessly to a royal from another country is improper, and that, as a Bellacort vassal, she shouldn't embarrass him. Solea quickly softens her voice and apologizes, saying she is only worried for him. Urenica is stunned at how quickly her tone changes. Then Solea turns to Urenica, politely acknowledging her as Livovni royalty and apologizing if she has been rude. She even offers to escort her to her room as a peace gesture. But this only makes Urenica more suspicious, and she instantly rejects the fake kindness in her mind, especially after what has seemed like an attempted murder. Acting fast, she pretends to be sick and collapses, claiming she is dying. Ureion sighs and says she never gives him any peace. Smiling to herself, Urenica feels proud. The act goes perfectly, just like the times she used to fake illness before. Ureion dismisses the knights, and after they leave, he firmly tells Solea to go home too. Solea hesitates and asks why, her voice trembling slightly. Urenica's mind explodes in defiance, raging internally that Solea has tried to kill her and labeling her a villain, a patricide enabler, and a dangerous woman who who has no business marrying a man like Ureion. She glares at Solea with all the strength she can muster, mentally challenging her to do something in return. Ureion observes her expressions and remarks that she is terrible at hiding things, which Urenica immediately denies. He insists that she is, and although she tries to disagree, she knows he is right, remembering how even her old boss used to chastise her for her transparent expressions. She cringes inside at how the critique follows her from her past life into this fantasy world. Ureion continues in a light tone, stating that the first time she faints might have been real, but the second is clearly an act. Urenica freezes, horrified that he knows. Her fear deepens as she thinks about Solea's ominous presence, whispering to herself that she is terrified and has assumed a black magician would keep such things hidden. She recalls that there is a type of dark magic that snatches away souls meant to return to God and turns corpses into puppets, a crime punishable by execution with no exceptions. That is why black magic has to be passed on in secret from teacher to student. Reeling from the realization, she considers the fact that Solea openly holds the second-in-command position at the Tower of Magic and trails off, acknowledging that she must be incredibly powerful, but also gives off a deeply strange feeling. A sudden thought hits her. She has messed with the wrong person. Ureion addresses her again, calmly promising that he will speak with Solea so that she doesn't use magic in her presence. Urenica tries to clarify, saying that what she means is that she has felt cold, damp, invisible hands. Ureion reassures her and adds that it is probably best if the two of them avoid one another. He explains that magic is like a second skin to Solea, who has done a great deal of work helping to develop Bellacort's Tower of Magic and wields immense magical power, which is likely the reason for the sensation Urenica has felt. Internally, Urenica panics further, realizing she is completely doomed and can't even try her luck in this situation. She bitterly whispers to herself that the woman Ureion trusts so much is a black magician who should be executed, and laments that although she has this knowledge because she reads the novel, she can't exactly tell him that. She glances nervously at Solea, afraid that even a misstep in speech might provoke her wrath and lead to her being slaughtered. Ureion's commanding tone returns as he asserts that Solea will no longer be allowed to enter the palace as freely as she has that day. Urenica's heart flutters at his authority and charisma, and she thinks admiringly about how cool DeKalb's dad is. She stammers out her thanks and catches herself, embarrassed by how easily she has almost fallen for his handsome face. Her attention then shifts to a palace visible in the distance, and she marvels at its architecture, noting the onion-shaped white domes, large windows, and ivory curtains. It reminds her of the royal palace in Lvovne. Realization dawns, and she gasps, urgently requesting to be let down. Her thoughts flash back to a scene in the original novel where Teresia, pregnant, looks up at the same white, onion-shaped castle with tears pouring down her face as the architecture reminds her of home. Urenica suddenly understands that the King of Bellacort has arranged this for her, and she realizes this is where Teresia and Brigitte have lived in the original novel, Berilia Palace. Urenica stands in awe, taking in the view before her and thinking that it looks exactly like how it is described in the novel. Her thoughts are interrupted by a polite greeting as someone addresses her, saying it is an honor to meet her. Confused, Urenica replies hesitantly. A maid with light brown hair approaches with a warm and graceful presence, pulling back the curtains and gently asking how she is feeling that day. Urenica observes her carefully and remembers from the novel that this particular maid looks after Teresia with the most care out of all the maids in Berilia Palace. Trying not to show that she already knows who she is, Urenica responds that she is all right, but the memory lingers. This is Marianne, the maid closest to Teresia and Brigitte during their time in Belcourt. Even though this is her first time meeting her, it feels strangely familiar, and Urenica notes how surreal the feeling is. As she walks through the palace, she notices every detail, the grand staircase, the warm sunlight shining into the rooms, and recognizes it all from the novel. This is the place where Teresia and Brigitte live, where Brigitte's story begins, and the vivid sunsets once described in prose are now real before her eyes. Standing in that space, Urenica feels conflicted, even though she has confirmed long ago that this is the world of the novel she once reads. Something about being there makes it hit differently. She wonders if it is because this is the very place where Teresia spends 10 painful years. She steels herself, reassuring herself that no matter what, she has done the right thing by preventing Teresia from being taken far from home while pregnant. Her thoughts are interrupted interrupted again by a question about whether the castle is to her liking. Startled, she quickly replies that it is nice. Internally, she wonders if he has chosen a place that reminds her of Lvovne, or perhaps reminds him of her. Ureion appears relieved by her response and admits his curiosity, asking why she keeps calling him father or dad, noting that she has mentioned it several times already. His straightforward question flusters her, and she laughs nervously, claiming it is because he reminds her of her father. But she knows that is a lie. She can't tell him the truth, that when she reads the novel and he dies, she cries out for her father and weeps as though it truly happens. Ureion narrows his eyes, clearly unconvinced, and tells her bluntly that she isn't a very good liar. Urenica weakly insists it is true, but he maintains that she is only good at being insistent. Embarrassed, she tries to shift the subject, promising not to do it anymore and assuring him she will be careful. His tone softens as he nods and tells her it is disconcerting to hear. He wishes her a good rest and tells her to call a maid immediately if she needs anything. As he turns to leave, his final words are firm and meaningful, reminding her that she is an important guest of Bellacort and encouraging her not to hesitate if there is anything she wants while she remains there. Urenica watches him walk away, her thoughts swirling with emotion. She notes how the way he naturally shows consideration makes her heart flutter. She remembers how he has spoken harshly to Solea earlier and considers that maybe he isn't always kind. Maybe he is the type to cut someone off completely if they cross a line. Without thinking, she calls out to him and asks if he is going to marry that woman. Ureion pauses, surprised, and clarifies if she means Lady Elodia. He replies that it is likely what will happen, as Solea is not lacking in qualities befitting a queen. Urenica feels her frustration rise and mentally cries out that none of that even matters. Solea isn't fit to be queen at all. She is a powerful mage who uses outlawed black magic, has already tried to kill her, and more importantly, will one day encourage Ureion's own son to kill him. But she knows bitterly that she has no evidence to support any of it. Clenching her fists, she resolves that she has to make Ureion trust her more than Lady Elodia and do whatever she can to protect him. His parting words echo in her mind as he walks away, reminding her that she is a princess of Lvovne and should be more cautious. Determined, Urenica finds her exhaustion slowly turning into a fresh sense of resolve, the heavy tiredness in her body fading as she begins to feel more alert and focused. Still, her determination is quickly tested when she finds herself in an unexpected situation. Ureion starts giving her a serious lecture about being more careful. His tone is calm but firm as he tells her to follow some important rules. First, he warns her not to let just anyone into private places like her bedroom. Urenica, always quick-witted, responds cheekily, pointing out that he himself just walked into her room, but Ureion doesn't react to her teasing and goes on with his second rule. If someone does come in, she must tell them to leave right away, without waiting or being polite. Urenica tilts her head in confusion, not sure why he's being so serious, but he continues anyway. The third rule is even more surprising. He tells her never to hold on to a man who chooses to walk away. His words make her heart skip, and she starts to wonder if he is talking about her and him specifically. She becomes curious and thinks this might be a good moment to see how he feels. Trying to be bold, she decides to test his limits and see how far she can go if she says she likes him. She wants to win over Lady Elodia and takes a small risk. With a brave face and playful smile, she asks what would happen if she told him she had feelings for him, wondering if she would still need to be cautious. Ureion's face doesn't change, and he answers with his fourth rule: never say things like that to just anyone, in just any place. His voice is steady, like he's used to handling situations calmly, and he gives her a small sigh and a knowing look. He tells her she really shouldn't try to fool him. Urenica freezes for a moment, her playful mood shaken, but her thoughts are still racing. He thinks he understands things well, but he still doesn't know the truth about the woman he trusts. She gets frustrated and boldly asks him if he doesn't even see her as a woman. Ureion's face turns more serious, and he says there's no reason she wouldn't be one. Then, with a sigh, he tells her that being a woman doesn't make her reckless behavior okay. He ends the conversation by saying she is unpredictable and leaves her alone to rest. When he walks out, Urenica slumps in her seat, feeling defeated. She admits to herself that her plan didn't work, and it will take more than small tricks to win over someone like him. But even so, she tells herself she won't give up. She's not ready to back down. Meanwhile, Ureion walks away, thinking about the strange and lively princess from Lvovne. He finds her to be both funny and confusing, small and cute on the outside, but with a surprising amount of spirit and strength inside. He remembers why he took action before. He never meant to hurt her, only to send a clear warning to her country. That's why he made sure his top soldiers were careful not to cause too much damage. But now, with Urenica around, he feels like he may have brought back someone far more difficult to handle than expected. Just then, one of his men comes to report that all magical items or possible threats have been cleared from within 200 yards of Berilia Palace. Ureion thinks for a moment, then tells him to make the safe area smaller, down to 500 feet instead. The man hesitates, saying this will now include the royal garden, but Ureion insists. He says he made a promise to protect Urenica and doesn't want even a small risk to harm her. Watching her from a distance, he smiles a little, thinking she's like a small kitten, brave, curious, and unaware of the world's dangers. But then, his smile fades as he gives another important order. He tells Ferric not to let Lady Elodia into the palace for now and to make sure the staff knows. Ferric is surprised and says that Lady Elodia might not take it well. But Ureion says calmly that he's never really paid attention to her before, and now things are different. Now, he has someone important to protect, and Elodia's magic is too risky to ignore. He walks away, thinking he's made the right choice. Still, the next morning, as new problems begin to rise, he quietly starts to wonder if one of his choices might cause more trouble than he expected. Urenica wakes up feeling groggy and stretches, immediately sensing that something doesn't feel right. A maid tells her she must have been very tired from her long journey because she has slept nearly the entire day. Shocked, Urenica gasps at the thought of sleeping that long. She checks her body, and while it does feel a bit lighter after so much rest, she doesn't actually feel refreshed. Her mind races as she thinks maybe she'll feel better after washing up and eating, though it still bothers her that she has slept for almost 24 hours without waking once. She figures it is probably because she has been completely worn out after spending the whole day riding a galloping horse, and accepts that idea with a shrug. As she tries to settle her thoughts, another maid comes in and says she has received special instructions to care for her, and the maid asks if she is sensitive to magic. Urenica admits that she is, very much so, but quickly says she is fine and not to worry, refusing to let her condition define her. She reminds herself that being near the king is her real treatment. Even so, the maid looks at her with sympathy, and Urenica mutters that the maid must think she is a dying princess trying to be brave. She quickly corrects herself, saying that isn't the case. The maid then explains that all magical ores in Berilia Palace and within 500 yards have been removed to keep her safe. Urenica is surprised and tries to picture how big that area is. She notices the maid smiling slightly, probably realizing Urenica has no idea how the palace is laid out, which is true. The maid suggests she explore the grounds and says markers are placed at the edge of the 500-yard boundary. Curious, Urenica asks what the markers look like and figures it is a good idea to look around if she is going to stay a while, whether to flirt with Ureion or deal with Solia. As she starts walking, she mutters that the maid isn't joking about the markers being easy to spot. She then notices a garden and asks if it is the palace garden. The maid confirms that it is part of the royal garden, and the 500-yard boundary stretches from there to Certa Palace in the west, the drill hall in the south, and the northern gate. The maid tells Urenica that as long as she stays within the marked area, she will be safe. But stepping outside could be dangerous since no one can say where or how many magical ores might be around. Urenica understands and thinks that while this treatment is much better than what most hostages would get, she is still stuck, and her own sensitivity to magic is the real problem. The maid also mentions that if Urenica ever wants to leave the safe zone, the king has ordered that he be informed right away. This makes Urenica perk up, wondering if that means he will come see her in person. Though she doubts it based on how distant he seems the day before, she still hopes to explore beyond the garden. Just as the maid asks where she'd like to go, a new voice speaks up, saying he has been sent by the king to escort her. When she asks who he is, he introduces himself as Thierry Schumart, a priest from the Temple of Loris. Urenica quickly assumes that the king sending a priest means he doesn't want to meet her himself. As Thierry gives her a short tour, he explains the garden they pass is Varishad, once special to the late king and queen. Now, without a queen, the gardener maintains it. When Urenica asks if the king visits it, Thierry says yes. He even has tea there with Lady Elodia. At her name, Urenica becomes alert and asks if they are engaged. Thierry says they aren't yet, but people are considering Lady Elodia for the role of queen. Frowning, Urenica acknowledges that while it isn't official, it seems Lady Elodia is the one clinging to the king. However, Thierry Thierry's next comment surprises her. He personally believes they might be engaged before the year is over. Disheartened, Urenica realizes she is back at square one. If he isn't outright refusing the match, that means he doesn't dislike her. She asks whether the king has feelings for Lady Elodia, and Thierry responds that it seems he doesn't particularly dislike the idea of marrying her. From a strategic standpoint, Lady Elodia is a strong match and is set to become the next master of the Tower of Magic. Bitterly, Urenica thinks that for someone like her, Bellacort Palace might as well be the final dungeon, and wonders how she is supposed to seduce the king if she can't even get close to him. She strengthens her resolve and decides she will wait until he comes to her. She has time, and for now, she will focus on the garden. From that day forward, Urenica makes the central garden her base of operations, keeping a constant lookout for the elusive king. Urenica marches off to the garden, determined and unwavering, her steps firm with resolve as she decides not to give up. Day after day, she returns to the same spot, sitting under the sun and staring toward the palace, stubbornly waiting for Ureion de Bellacort to appear. But no matter how long she waits, he is nowhere to be seen. On the fourth day, Thierry approaches her gently, calling her name with growing concern. She glares at him, frustration clearly written on her face, and demands to know if he has been lying to her. Thierry looks genuinely confused and quickly insists that, as a priest of Loris, he is forbidden from lying. His honesty does little to comfort her, and with a dramatic sigh, she throws herself onto a nearby cushion, groaning loudly and complaining that she has wasted 4 days of her life. She mutters that even doing absolutely nothing is exhausting, then grabs her head in exasperation. As her emotions overflow, she begins to reflect more seriously on her condition. She realizes it's not just magic use that affects her. Just being on the magical grounds of Bellacort slowly drains her strength. She laments out loud, with a dramatic voice, that maybe if she could just hold Ureion's hand once, she might feel a little better. Thierry, always gentle and doing his best to support her, tries to explain that His Majesty must be very busy, especially after returning from the Lvovne expedition. Of her, he adds with an awkward pause. While meant to comfort her, his words only make her feel worse. Her thoughts spiral into doubt as she wonders if Ureion simply doesn't want to see her, or if maybe she's been too clingy and has annoyed him by constantly staying close. She begins to feel embarrassed, thinking her strange behavior must have left a bad impression, or worse, that she's not even his type. Then a terrible thought crosses her mind. What if Ureion prefers women who are elegant and alluring, like Solea, with fox-shaped eyes, red lips, and a graceful figure? That would explain why he marries Solea in the novel, even if it's a tragic and dangerous love story. The idea sinks her into despair, making her feel like an unwanted character forcing herself into someone else's tale. She fears that being in this story might completely change the genre, but then, with a deep breath, she shakes herself out of it and stands up with new resolve. She reminds herself that people's tastes can change and declares that from now on, she will become his type. Yet the harsh reality quickly returns. She can't even get into his palace. Still, she refuses to back down. Clenching her fists, she announces that if Ureion won't look at her, she'll make him notice her. On the 5th day, right at 2 p.m., Urenica crouches behind a bush near the palace. She believes maybe he's not coming out because he knows she's waiting, so this time she'll wait where he can't see her. Marianne walks by, surprised to see her there, and softly asks why she's hiding. Urenica quickly hushes her, saying it's the perfect hiding place. If he can't see her, then he can't avoid her. Sitting quietly in the bush, she tells herself this is now a battle. His cold wall versus her determination, and she's not going to be the one to give up. Meanwhile, high above, Ureion watches the scene unfold. He sighs, thinking that if she had just stayed quietly in the garden and left after a while, things would have been easier. But now, on the 5th day, she's still there, clearly hiding and obviously waiting for him. He wonders if she truly doesn't realize how easy it is to see her from above. To him, it's clear. No princess would be hanging around his palace for any reason other than hoping to see him. At first, he chose to ignore her, thinking she'd give up. But clearly, she's not someone who gives up. Watching her sulk behind the bushes, he finds it oddly troubling. She reminds him of a small, lost kitten, determined, stubborn, and strangely endearing. He tries to convince himself not to be distracted, but his gaze keeps drifting back to her. Despite his efforts to stay focused, the truth quietly settles in. He is intrigued by her. He watches her longer than he should and finally admits to himself Urenica of Levnne has caught his interest in a way he didn't expect. Ureion grew up as an only child, surrounded by silence and duty. The few cousins he once had earned their noble titles early and left Bellacort Palace long ago. After the death of the late king, Ureion became the sole remaining member of the royal family still living in the palace. From a young age, he grew used to solitude, his world shaped by strict discipline, daily training, and carefully planned routines, with barely any room for unpredictability or emotion. His life has long been one of control, distance, and self-reliance. But recently, two very specific things have begun testing his patience in ways he didn't expect. The first is Levnne's repeated defiance and diplomatic impertinence, constantly challenging his authority. The second, far more exhausting, is Lady Elodia, the woman who calls herself his fiancée. Soleya acts devoted in public, playing the role of a sweet and caring partner, always speaking with a soft tone and eyes full of affection. But Ureion sees right through her performance. He knows she pretends to understand him better than anyone, but underneath her charm lies something dangerous. Her presence makes him feel like a snake is always watching, waiting for the right time to strike. Although she's beautiful, graceful, and clever, he keeps her at a distance. Were it not for the political importance of her connection to the Tower of Magic, he would have cut ties with her long ago. He knows she's aware of this truth, and it's exactly why she keeps appearing, using her allure as a tool to manipulate, never truly leaving him alone. The disruption she causes feels constant and suffocating, pulling at the balance he tries so hard to maintain. In contrast, the presence of Princess Urenica is entirely different. Though she too upends his routine, it doesn't leave him with the same sense of annoyance. Somehow, in only 5 days, Urenica has managed to accomplish something Soleya couldn't achieve in 5 years. She pulls him out of his repetitive, tightly controlled life. Meanwhile, Urenica is locked in her own emotional battle. Despite eating and sleeping better than ever, she feels constantly weak, as if her life is slowly being drained. She tries to understand why, wondering whether it's the magical ore imported from Ureion that powers much of Bellacort, or the sheer number of powerful magicians gathered in one place, or maybe it's Soleya's lingering dark magic hanging in the air. The feeling terrifies her. She begins to fear that one day she may fall asleep and never wake up. Yet even as her health worsens, she doesn't want to ask for help. She doesn't want to bother Marianne, and the idea of sending someone to Ureion feels too desperate. She certainly won't march into his palace uninvited. Feeling alone and helpless, her thoughts grow darker. She wonders if this coldness and indifference is truly the nature of the man destined to become the father of Dekalb, the child she's meant to save. She tries to reason with herself, telling herself she doesn't need him to hold her or embrace her. Just seeing him, even being near him for a moment, might be enough to ease the pressure weighing on her chest. Then, as if the world hears her quiet plea, Ureion appears. His voice cuts through the heavy air, calling her name gently. Just hearing him is like a breeze blowing through a closed room, and for a moment, everything becomes lighter. She turns to him, barely able to stay upright, and reaches out as if her very life depends on him. As she stumbles, her legs finally give out, and before she can fall, Ureion moves swiftly and catches her in his arms. She leans into him, her body weak but her mind slightly calmer, feeling like she can finally breathe again. In that quiet moment, a soft, warm glow begins to surround them, as though something magical, or perhaps emotional, has sparked between them. Urenica's face relaxes, her eyes losing their pain. Ureion notices how weak Urenica looks and gently comments on it. She leans into him, silently admitting that being near him is slowly bringing her energy back. Not wanting to lose that comforting feeling, she holds on to him tightly, hoping he won't pull away. As she looks up at him, she wonders when she will get to see him again. Ureion, keeping a calm but slightly annoyed look, says that since she seems to be enjoying herself, he has left her alone. Shocked, Urenica asks if it really looks like she is having fun. As he continues to hold her, she finds herself captivated by his presence and the scent around him. She wishes she could soak it all in, thinking she wouldn't feel so weak or sick anymore if she could. His gentle pat on her back calms her, and she lets out a small sigh, though she also frowns a little inside, wondering why he acts so distant before if he is going to be this kind now. It doesn't seem fair. Ureion then comments that she looks calmer, and Urenica quickly wipes her face, not wanting him to see her tears. She doesn't want to seem like a child who always cries. He leans closer and firmly says he needs to check her face and asks her to turn. Nervous, Urenica hesitates, thinking of how nicely Marianne has done her hair that morning. It is messy now, but maybe she doesn't look too bad. She turns slowly, trying to look composed. Ureion studies her quietly, and she suddenly realizes she no longer feels tired at all. He asks casually if she has been busy lately, and she pouts, saying just a little. He raises an eyebrow and she insists again, her voice louder, that it really has been just a little. She begins to say that if he had been any busier, then he would have completely, then stops herself. Tilting his head, Ureion asks her to finish. She reminds herself that he is the king with important duties and she can't complain to him. Laughing awkwardly, she tells him to forget it, but he pushes her again to answer. Trying to change the subject, she grumbles about how unhelpful Thierry is and says that he isn't like Ureion. She adds that she can't exactly absorb divine power from a priest. She isn't a leech. Ureion smirks and asks what that makes him. Blushing, she grabs his hand and says he is different, and just holding his hand helps. She remembers a saying that love grows slowly like a drizzle, and thinks if love at first sight doesn't work, she'll go with the drizzle. Ureion pulls his hand back a little and tells her to ask Thierry for help if she needs anything. After all, that's what divine energy is for. Pouting, Urenica thinks he still doesn't understand. She looks at him and explains that getting divine energy from the priest might help her, but it would probably leave him drained. Ureion casually agrees. She pleads, saying just being near him is enough to heal her, and it would even be a good deed. Calling it a win-win for two tragic side characters, she clasps her hands together and begs him to visit her every 2 days. She promises not to be a burden or take up too much of his time, adding with a dramatic flair that if she dies in a foreign land, she'll come back and haunt him. Ureion sighs and tells her that once every 2 days would be difficult, as he will be very busy in the coming days. Her heart sinks, but just as she is about to give up hope, he adds that they can agree to once every 4 days, same time and place, for 30 minutes. He assures her he can commit to that. Urenica gasps in disbelief and asks if he really will. Ureion nods and says that even if he can't always make it once every 4 days, he will still frequent the garden, just asking her not to hide in strange places like she has that day. Her jaw drops as she stares at him, realizing he hasn't found her by accident. He has known she is hiding there all along. He smirks faintly and mentions that his office windows are quite large. Internally, she groans, realizing he has been avoiding her on purpose. She has foolishly believed he is being endlessly gracious and kind. Clenching her fists in frustration, she glares at him, declaring in her mind that he is a villain, just like de Kalb, and calling him a big meanie king. Ureion speaks in a calm but firm voice, reminding Urenica again about Thierry. He tells her that Thierry is a high priest who performs funeral rites and that she shouldn't feel guilty about receiving divine energy from him. After a short pause, he adds that if she ever feels too weak, she should go see him. Urenica blinks in confusion, tilting her head as she tries to understand and begins to realize he is gently scolding her, though in a polite way. Still unsure, she asks if such a high-ranking priest is really the right person for her condition. Ureion raises an eyebrow and asks if she has never heard the name Thierry, implying it is famous even in Lvovne. Caught off guard, she hesitates, thinking Lvovne might have more priests than magicians, but that doesn't mean much. She asks why it matters, and Ureion, clearly amused, explains that Thierry is about to become the next Archbishop of Varishad and that he himself has recommended him. Urenica is shocked. He adds that, as the only heir to the Bellacort throne, his endorsement is powerful, and that Thierry has divine energy nearly equal to his own. Urenica panics, realizing the man she casually drinks tea with is someone so important. Ureion sees her reaction and gently reminds her that he has never lied when promising her safety and comfort. Those words make her think back to all the things she has assumed about him, that he is cruel and cold, the villainous father of a future tyrant. And now, those thoughts feel completely wrong. With a softer look, Ureion says what she says earlier isn't entirely false. Urenica, still in shock, whispers a thank you. He continues, saying that 30 minutes every 4 days with him isn't much, but it is something they can stick to. Urenica feels emotional, realizing how touched she is. Just a while ago she is crying, but now his presence feels like a healing potion. Looking up at him, she catches her breath. He is so handsome. It seems unfair to have to win over someone who can steal hearts with just one look. She suddenly blurts out that he is very handsome. Ureion narrows his eyes and reminds her about saying things like that. She quickly corrects herself, calling him sire, while thinking that he probably hates being called dad. She admits to herself that she still knows so little about him, his likes, dislikes, and where his limits are. Determined, she promises to be patient and figure it all out, planning to slowly break down his walls. As if reading her mind, Ureion says she is probably thinking something strange again. Embarrassed, she denies it, trying hard not to make him close himself off again. From that day on, she visits the garden every 4 days. Just being near him makes her feel better, like a miracle. But over time, she notices Ureion seems tenser. Though he stays composed, something is clearly bothering him. She guesses it might be royal duties but feels warm inside when she sees him smile sometimes. It suits him much more than his usual serious face. Then, snapping her out of her thoughts, Ureion gently calls her name. She answers, confused, and he asks if she will write a letter to Levnne. She asks why, and he explains that her father has threatened to destroy Gluckman Road unless he receives a letter written by her. Urenica's shock is immediate and intense. She cries out in disbelief, horrified at her father's reaction. Her thoughts spiral into panic as she realizes this might be why Ureion has been on edge. The weight of reality hits her. 3 weeks have passed since her kidnapping. Guilt wraps around her chest. She remembers feeling relieved that Teresia isn't the one brought here but hasn't spared a thought for anything else since. Her expression softens as memories from her past life return. In her real life, her parents die when she is still young and she doesn't know much about familial love. But Urenica, the youngest daughter of the King and Queen of Levnne, is deeply loved, adored as the baby of the family. Her imagination paints a vivid picture of her family's reaction, her parents calling out for her, demanding her return, sobbing, asking for their baby girl to be given back to them, screaming the name Yenny. Her hands tremble slightly as she fully imagines the chaos her disappearance must have caused. Tears prick her eyes as guilt consumes her. She berates herself, realizing that while survival has been important, she has forgotten something equally vital. She has completely forgotten about Levnne. Urenica reflects on her situation, guilt beginning to bubble up inside her. She admits to herself that she really should think more about the family she has left behind, imagining that her father probably believes she is locked away in some dark cell without food or water. Yet her perspective begins to shift as she acknowledges the reality. Ureion has provided her with beautiful dresses, 3 full meals a day, snacks, and a safe place that even reminds her of home. In truth, she is practically living in luxury. Still, the guilt lingers, her thoughts turning back to Levnne and the family she has neglected to consider until now. She chastises herself, wondering how she could have forgotten them. Wanting to reassure her father, she decides to write a letter, though she hesitates at first. It would be so much easier, she thinks, if her father could just see her through a magic sphere. But she quickly reminds herself that Levnne doesn't have a sphere system to connect with Bellacort. Her home country is, unfortunately, a little bit of a backwater kingdom. Resolving to go through with it, she carefully drafts the letter, writing that she is doing well and that the King of Bellacort has not mistreated her, asking her father not to worry too much and inquiring about Teresia's well-being, especially with her delivery date approaching. As she is writing, Ureion's calm voice interrupts her thoughts, telling her to write whatever she wants because he won't be checking it. She freezes, her mind immediately racing. Maybe she can sneak in a clever hint to delay negotiations about Gluckman Road. But before she can even finish forming her plan, Ureion adds that he will, in fact, be reading it after all. Her expression has made him suspicious. Flustered, Urenica sighs internally, wondering how he always manages to see right through her. But in the end, Ureion doesn't check the letter before sending it, and she is left with a confusing mix of relief and regret. If she has known he isn't going to read it, she would have written whatever she wanted. She fumes inwardly, calling him mean for confusing her like this. Her desperation mounts. If her father reopens Gluckman Road, Ureion will surely send her straight back to Levnne. And if she returns, she will die an early death within 5 years, and Ureion will end up marrying a black mage instead. She sighs quietly, hoping her father will be able to read between the lines, to understand what she is truly trying to communicate in the letter. She silently begs him to take it as a sign and delay the negotiations for as long as possible. Ureion, who has been watching her closely, suddenly asks if she wants to return to Levnne or stay in Bellacort, noting that she is hard to figure out. Urenica hesitates but sees an opportunity. She considers telling him she likes Bellacort better than Levnne, wondering if that might convince him to let her stay. But Ureion isn't easily convinced. He points out that her body rejects this land and reminds her that she has no real connections here. Frustrated but determined, Urenica decides to play it safe, reasoning that she still has time and just needs to wait for the right moment. As their conversation continues, she notices something unusual. He has originally said their meetings would be limited to 30 minutes, but it has clearly been longer than that. He seems more relaxed than usual today. Cautiously, she asks if she can have a little more of his time. To her surprise, Ureion responds warmly, asking if she would like that. Flustered, she blurts out a request for him to hold her hand. Without hesitation, Ureion obliges, sending divine energy into her through their contact. Urenica gasps, surprised at how effortlessly he transfers energy. She thinks it is unfair. Priests need to go through rituals and process to pass on divine energy, yet Ureion can do it casually, just by touching her. Smirking, he explains that he doesn't need to hold her long to transfer energy. It is more efficient this way. But then, he warns her not to provoke him with careless words, suggesting she should choose her comments more wisely. Confused, Urenica asks what he means by that, but his tone returns to its usual distant stoicism, making her wonder if she has imagined his earlier warmth. As he prepares to leave, Ureion gives her one final warning. He tells her not to leave Berillia the next day, because Lady Elodia will be visiting the royal palace. Urenica freezes as the ominous name of Lady Elodia, the Black Mage, echoes repeatedly in her mind, sending shivers down her spine as she sits visibly distressed, her thoughts spiraling. Marianne, her maid, notices her troubled expression and gently asks if something is bothering her, trying to comfort her. Internally, Urenica panics, wondering what she should do now that Elodia is coming to the palace tomorrow, a woman capable of using black magic to bury people alive. Marianne, unaware of the true danger, cheerfully suggests that she have some warm milk to calm her down. Urenica reluctantly agrees and sips it, acknowledging that Marianne is right and that drinking something warm does help soothe her nerves. Still, her mind races with questions. She wonders what Lady Elodia wants and whether she really loves Ureion. Though the mage has supposedly been by his side for a long time, Urenica questions why such a powerful woman would feel threatened by someone like herself, the princess of a small kingdom. Images of their first encounter flood her memory when Solea immediately tries to drag her into the underworld, possibly out of jealousy. Urenica shivers, reflecting that whether or not Solea truly loves Ureion is irrelevant. What matters is that she clearly has a goal. She wonders why someone would want to marry a man who is her complete opposite, and realizes that if Solea is caught plotting anything, she will be executed. Her thoughts return to the novel she knows, recalling that Dekalb is a monster born of the strongest divine power and the most evil magic, someone capable of possessing everything in the world, even the distant world of the gods beyond the Udeta. She speculates that Solea's true plan might be to cross the Udeta, the boundary between heaven and earth, and gain the realm of the gods using black magic. Urenica continues piecing it all together and considers that if Solea is hoping to achieve this through her son, it would explain everything. Yet she also remembers that the experiment fails in the novel, as Dekalb loses his divinity upon learning black magic. Still puzzled, she wonders why Solea would use her own son to obtain the power of both worlds and questions whether there is an even deeper hidden goal. She reflects that although Solea leaves a strong impression in the novel, she only appears briefly. Determined, Urenica tells herself she should follow Ureion's advice and hide out in Berillia Palace as he suggests. But then she second-guesses herself, knowing she cannot spend her entire time there avoiding Solea. Even if she is sent back to Levnne, she believes she must prevent Solea and Ureion from marrying. She starts contemplating various options, including doing whatever she can to interrupt them whenever they are together, even if it means sacrificing herself to prove Solea is a black magician. Her thoughts spiral further as she realizes that using one option might immediately lead to the next. If she tries to get between them and Solea kills her with black magic, then Solea would be caught red-handed. She imagines such an outcome where, through her own death, Ureion would avoid an untimely death and instead live a long, happy life. But she quickly shakes herself out of that line of thought, realizing that she cannot cannot die, since the whole point of her actions is to survive. Her resolve strengthens, and she tells herself that she will just act the way she usually does tomorrow. After all, she is never much of a planner, and a life unplanned is a life lived with energy and gusto. Meanwhile, Ureion reflects on his decision to limit Solea's palace visits. He notes that it has been 3 weeks since he last sees her and admits that he can no longer postpone their meeting. Already, he reduces her visits from twice a week to just once. Though he cannot trust her, he acknowledges that she is an excellent magician and symbolizes the crown's relationship to the Tower of Magic. His frustration builds as he considers the possibility that, if nothing else happens, Solea might become his companion for life, though that would mean spending the rest of his life being wary of his own queen, a thought that exhausts him. He steels himself, determined not to be shaken or to show weakness, even though the idea of how clingy she'll be after being kept away for 3 weeks feels suffocating. As Urenica peeks outside her window, she spots Ureion standing tall but looking distracted. She rushes to open the window and gleefully remarks that she has caught him outside, saying she thought he would stay inside Berilia Palace all day. Ureion watches her with an annoyed expression, wondering whether he forgets to tell her about Solea visiting. But he's sure he does. She just never listens to anyone, he thinks, shaking his head in amused resignation and observing once again that the princess is truly incorrigible. Urenica says she is not a predictable woman, and as he looks at her, Ureion thinks that, for some reason, she looks more delicate that day, almost translucent. He wonders if it is because of the white dress and concludes it would be better if she doesn't wear white. He raises his hand and gently caresses her hair, thinking it is strange that he feels like he knows this princess even less than he knows Solea, yet perhaps it is because she moves so freely and unrestrained, and simply watching her makes him feel just as free. He then asks what brings her there, despite the obvious danger she is putting herself in. She hesitates and begins to say something about that day. He presses her to explain further. She clasps his hand and announces that she plans on kidnapping him. He asks how she plans on doing that. She explains that because of her circumstances, she is hoping he will cooperate with her. She wriggles slightly to test his reaction and then laughs, asking whether he would prefer to allow himself to be abducted by her or have her bother him all day. He is taken aback and asks what she is unhappy about that day to do something like this. She replies that it is his schedule for the day and that she is thinking about thoroughly interrupting it. He wonders if she truly means it. She continues by pointing out that he isn't engaged to Solea anyway, so she and Solea are in the same position. She promises his safety and comfort and says she is confident she can guarantee that, asking if he will cooperate. She winks playfully and adds that nothing can be done if he chooses to take her words as a threat. He responds that he doesn't know and thinks to himself that he has about half an hour to an hour until lunch with Solea, who will arrive exactly on time since she knows how particular he is about punctuality. His thoughts drift to how Solea always spins rumors and scandals to get rid of noble women who approach him, although this princess looks like someone who can never be implicated in a scandal. Still, even without Solea's interference, being close to a princess he has abducted from another kingdom wouldn't look good for either of them. She playfully asks what he thinks and whether he will come with her. He chuckles and says he can't say no, thinking it is as if she already knows he isn't looking forward to meeting Solea. Urenica is shocked, and when she calls out to him, Ureion jumps out the window and asks her to tell him what she plans to do with him once she abducts him. She blinks in surprise and is in shock that it actually works. He looks at her, confused, and calls out to her again. She thinks to herself that she really manages to lure him in. She has tried flirting slyly before, and he has avoided every attempt, so maybe being direct has been the right approach all along. She rolls her eyes slightly and replies that they should first run away. He is strangely going along with everything that day. She extends her hand toward him, and he accepts it. As they walk, Urenica leads the way, her mind in a jumble as she wonders whether he is just humoring her. She silently thanks him and considers how Solea might respond if she sees her stealing Ureion away, thinking Solea might literally bury her alive with her own 2 hands. She resolves that she needs to get back to Berilia and lock him up with her for the day, though she wonders why she seems to be the only one distressed about the situation. She stops and turns toward him, thinking that she is doing this so the both of them can live. She pouts and says that one day he will be grateful to her. He smiles and replies that perhaps one day he will be, since there is no telling the future. She feels annoyed and resolves that they need to hurry and get out of there before Solea sees them. Then she resumes walking while holding his hand, but Ureion Ureion suddenly stops and pulls her toward him, hiding them both behind a tree. He has spotted Solea in the garden, looking for something. Urenica is shocked for a moment, then understands the situation and thinks in alarm, wondering what Solea is doing in front of Bellacort Palace. Solea stands boldly in front of Bellacort Palace, and Urenica, frozen in shock, instantly panics, thinking this is the worst situation she could be in. Her thoughts race as she struggles to speak, managing only to say that she recognizes Solea, but Ureion quickly hushes her, his voice low as he mutters that this is a problem. She turns to study his face and sees something that surprises her. He is staring at Solea, but his gaze holds no warmth, no affection, no trace of romantic interest. From where they stand, Solea is the only thing visible in the courtyard, yet Ureion's eyes remain unreadable, calm, and distant. That's when Urenica starts to question Solea's purpose in being there. It feels off. Solea isn't there for Ureion. She must be there for Urenica. That thought sends a chill down her spine. Ureion's grip tightens around her as if to shield her, and she realizes she's trapped in place, his arms firmly holding her back, not letting her step out into view. Then Ureion leans in and whispers gently, offering to take her to Varishad. Caught off guard, she panics again, but deep inside, she agrees. Anywhere away from Solea is fine. Meanwhile, Ferik intercepts Lady Elodia before she can step any closer. She turns around gracefully, wearing a sweet smile as she addresses him by name, her voice pleasant and polite. Ferik calmly tells her that, by direct order of His Majesty, no one is allowed past that point. Solea, ever the actress, replies with feigned innocence, apologizing for the mistake and claiming she didn't realize. But inside, she's fuming. This is the first time she's heard that Ureion himself made the restriction. He's given that fragile, weak girl an entire palace and made sure nothing magical can come near her. Solea doubts it'll last, but still, the gesture is too meaningful to ignore. Snapping her fingers behind her back, she tells herself she needs to end this before it gets worse. Ureion already suspects her, and if his heart truly begins to turn away, it will become a problem. In her mind, there is only one woman worthy of standing beside Ureion Bellacort, the man who holds the strongest and purest divine power in the world, and that woman is her. As she walks away, she discreetly points something dangerous in the direction of Urenica's residence. Ferik doesn't seem to notice and calmly tells her again that she need not apologize and politely asks her to return to the main palace since His Majesty is waiting. Solea nods but narrows her eyes as something feels wrong. Ureion is never early, not even by a minute, so she doesn't understand why it happened now. Curious, she asks Ferik if Ureion personally told him she was there. Ferik stiffens slightly, then admits that no, he simply saw her entering the area and thought to inform her. She smiles and accepts the answer, but internally begins to wonder. She recalls that black magic and divine power cancel each other out. They're invisible to one another. That must be why she can't sense him and why he can't sense her either. But it also means he could be nearby, watching, and she wouldn't know. As she walks away with grace, the plants behind her suddenly wither, a quiet but threatening sign of the magic she's left behind. Back at Ureion's side, he watches Urenica closely and suddenly asks if she has some kind of old grudge against Solea. Urenica looks away awkwardly, realizing she didn't think things through. She bitterly recalls sticking her tongue out at the most dangerous black magician in the world, without understanding what it might cost her. Then Ureion adds that he really doesn't understand what's going on, clearly confused. Before she can stop herself, Urenica blurts out that she has no hidden motives and just wants to keep him captive for the day. His eyes widen and he clarifies that he wasn't even talking about her, he meant Solea, but now he's more suspicious. Urenica mentally panics, realizing she's said too much. She tells herself to stay still and quiet from now on. As she watches Ureion deep in thought, she nervously wonders what could be going through his mind. Then, almost as if he's read her thoughts, he suddenly asks what she's scheming this time. Her heart skips a beat, thumping with guilt, though she hopes he's still talking about Solea, not her. Looking at him, Urenica finds it strange how unfeeling he is towards someone he is supposedly considering making his fiancée, and concludes that Ureion is much more wary of that woman than she initially thinks. She speculates that he might really be using the city tour as an excuse to get away from Solea, which seems more plausible, making her think that this might officially be the getaway sequence. She clears her throat and asks Ureion if they are running away right then, but he replies that that she is abducting him and wonders aloud what he is supposed to do with such an inept kidnapper. Shocked, Urenica questions internally whether he is messing with her and realizes he is trying to evade explaining himself any further. He continues by saying that at this rate, she will lose him as soon as they walk the city streets, prompting her to ask what he means by lose. Ureion then asks his servant to give him something, and the servant brings robes. He bundles Urenica up in the robe, buttoning every button and tying every ribbon tightly, causing her to feel like she is choking. Ureion states that it is much better this way. She spins around to observe and reflects on the reason for being wrapped up from head to toe, assuming it is to avoid danger while walking around in an expensive dress, though she also thinks Ureion will stand out far more than she does. He asks her what she would like to see the most, listing the Temple of Loris, the wolf's statue in Yugal Plaza, or the founding mural, and she chooses the temple, but then hesitates and asks what about him, correcting herself and calling him Majesty. He assures her that she will not lose him so easily, to which she agrees, noting that he really stands out in a crowd, before quickly realizing that is not what she means. She panics at the thought of him walking around in public dressed like that with his distinctive face, especially when the goal is to get away from Solia. When he asks what the problem is, she inwardly admits there is a lot to say but not enough space to explain. She flaps the robe and insists he wear it too. Though he hesitates and says he doesn't think it is a good idea, he agrees if she wants him to and puts up the hood as she requests. After dressing him, she giggles, pleased with her work, and he asks if she enjoys wrapping things up, to which she seriously replies that she actually prefers taking things off. But that doesn't apply to this situation. She adds that he is one to talk, as he is the one who has wrapped her up so thoroughly that only her face peeks out. He comments that it is almost scary how naive she is, which startles her, and she responds that she is a grown woman who knows lots. He smiles playfully, doubting her, and then grabs her hand, causing her heart to race. He explains that although the palace might be quiet, Varishad is a busy city with places like the Tower of Magic and the Magic Ore Market. Urenica, although she has held his hand many times before, wonders why her heart is pounding so strongly now. He advises her to stay by his side, given the number of magicians and magic practitioners in the city, and she assures him she will stick to him like glue. Internally, she reflects that her plan has gone off the rails, but is now a much more effective date than planned. Feeling proud of the progress she has made, she believes that nothing bad can happen as long as she stays with him, and nothing in the world scares her if he is beside her. She then invites him to go, referring to him as her hostage, and he smiles and agrees. As they step outside the gates, a knight brings a horse and greets Ureion, who nods and speaks to the horse, Ruid, saying it has been a while. Urenica recognizes the horse as the one they ride to Bellacort, noting he doesn't seem as scary now and deciding she should try to learn horseback riding in case she ever has to escape alone. Ureion then lifts her onto the horse and she thanks him, noting how far up she is and thinking that horseback riding might still be difficult for her. He gets on the horse and instructs her to adjust her posture, which she does. He then tells the knight to take care of everything before he returns and instructs Raiden and 3 others to follow unnoticed. The knight bows in understanding, and Urenica wonders what they are supposed to follow. Ureion then pulls the horse's reins, pushing it to run, and thus she finally gets to leave the palace for the first time since arriving in Bellacort. Urenica is amazed to see the Empire Bellacort, noticing how the small streets are so different from Levnne, the capital of Lvovne. Just like the roads she sees on the way there, they remind her once again of how small and rural Lvovne truly is. However, she can't shake the feeling that people are staring as murmurs fill the air around her, and she wonders if she is imagining things. Suddenly, Ureion tugs her hood and reminds her that it is best if she doesn't take it off since it would draw attention. She pouts, insisting she hasn't taken it off. He assures her that he will let her down soon and she can do her sightseeing then. She realizes she isn't imagining things after all and admits she doesn't particularly like people staring at her. Slumping slightly in the saddle, she mumbles in agreement, and he teases her by questioning her tone. The city bustles with life, and the lively chatter and activity around her offer a refreshing change from her usual solitude. She reminds herself to enjoy the moment, especially since they are away from Solia and she is with the most trustworthy escort in the world. When they stop, he lets her down, and she slips the robe from her head, addressing him formally. Ureion pulls it back and cautions her to be mindful of how she addresses him in public. She blinks and attempts a playful alternative, but he refuses to hear it. Crossing her arms in frustration, she concedes she can't do anything, and he instructs her not to to call him anything, reminding her she will be by his side the whole time anyway. She narrows her eyes at his oddly standoffish demeanor and resolves to call him Your Majesty just to annoy him, but sighs and reconsiders. He then explains that from that point onward, riding a horse will attract too much attention and that walking will be better for a general look at the city. She agrees, saying she likes walking, although she feels a bit guilty making him walk without his usual guards. He reassures her by saying he has to inspect the capital anyway and adds that there is something he wants to check on, reminding her again not to let the hood fall off. It feels at times like he can read her mind, and she hopes his words are genuine. She finds it difficult to figure him out. Sometimes he is kind and considerate, while at other times cold and distant, yet she can't help but be affected by even the smallest kindness, especially from someone with a face like his. As her heart races, she thanks him in advance and tells him he will be her health elixir, or rather, her shield for the day. He responds by saying he just hopes he won't lose her. She asks what he means, but he brushes it off, assuring her that as long as she has fun, he will be satisfied. She feels flustered, sensing he is flirting with her again, and when he extends his hand and invites her along, her heart races further. She blames it on his handsome face and tells him so, leaving him taken aback. He begins to question what she means, but she quickly urges them to move along, grabbing his hand and blushing furiously, wondering if she is overwhelmed by his divine energy. She avoids his gaze, feeling like her face is about to explode. Varishad is a large city with 4 main streets stretching from the royal palace in the center. To the east and west lie the noble estates, Fiela and the Highland. To the north is Anaxia, where commoners live, and to the south they enter Ugal, the arts district. As they reach the bustling Ugal Plaza, Ureion explains that it is considered the second heart of Varishad. She is impressed and excited, recognizing the place, but as she prepares to dash forward, he catches her hand and reminds her not to wander off. She returns to his side and notices that he seems more on edge than usual, though it might just be the shadow of his hood. He asks if she has heard of Ugal Plaza, and she confirms she has, explaining it has been recommended to her. When he asks who recommended it, she recalls how Thierry has enthusiastically encouraged her to visit the plaza, calling it the fruit of centuries of Bellacort culture and arts. She shares this, and Ureion's expression becomes unreadable as he comments on her growing closeness with Thierry. She questions why that is his response and whether she isn't allowed to make friends. He replies that of course she can, and that it would be stranger if they haven't gotten along. She reflects on how she has spent more time with Thierry and Marianne than with Ureion. Then he asks if Thierry allows her to call him by his name, and she frowns, suspecting he might be jealous. Ureion is stunned and repeats Urenica's accusation, asking if she really thinks he is jealous of her. She tells him not to look at her like she is being ridiculous because it hurts her feelings, then explains that she and Thierry know each other well enough to use first names. He replies that it is fine to call him Thierry, but only because they have reached a compromise after she keeps addressing him formally, just like with Marianne. Ureion agrees that if it is mutual, it is okay, but asks if she seriously lets Thierry call her by her name. She hesitates and says she is royalty after all. He seems a little disappointed, and she wonders why, asking herself if he wants to call her by her name too. To clarify, she tells him her full name is Ureioninovika, but people call her Urenica, Yenica, or Yeni, and she'll make an exception for him. Ureion thinks to himself that she clearly doesn't know how important names are in Bellacort, where only very close people use them, and nicknames aren't a thing, but he figures she wouldn't care even if he explains. He tells her she still doesn't understand Bellacort well, and when she asks what he means, he says he won't call her any of those names and reminds her of something he's told her before. She is disappointed by his answer and asks what he means. He sighs and says he has to stay cautious for her sake. She doesn't understand and thinks he often says confusing things. Then it occurs to her that maybe he doesn't like her being close to a priest he trusts, though she thinks that is his issue. She frowns and defends herself, saying she is just being friendly with Thierry and reminds him he hasn't come to the garden much, making her wait. He replies that he's been busy, which makes her feel like a child throwing a tantrum. She quickly says she is joking and thanks him for coming, admitting she doesn't expect him to entertain her all the time. He says he is glad she is so quick to accept things, which makes her irritated. Just then, someone runs past her quickly and Ureion pulls her close to protect her, warning her to be careful. A black marble rolls away from the man, and though she feels a sharp pain like being scratched, it fades thanks to Ureion's divine energy. Realizing what happens, she giggles, thinking the man must have been in a hurry, and thanks Ureion. He smiles and says moments like that make him glad she is careless. She asks if he is teasing her, and he says no, he is just relieved. She doesn't understand why, and he thinks telling her the truth would only scare her. He tells her not to act out of character, which confuses her, as she hasn't noticed anything odd. He taps her forehead and asks if they should keep going. She nods and looks around Ugel Plaza, admiring its beauty, the tiles, the wolf statue in the fountain, and the large mural. She buys 2 grilled skewers, not noticing another black marble nearby. Ureion distracts her by pointing out cotton candy, saying it suits her more. She pouts, saying that isn't nice. He asks if she doesn't like her hair, and she replies that isn't it, though she secretly doesn't like the thought of Ureion comparing her hair to Soleia's perfect hair. While eating, she turns and says she doesn't want cotton candy and will eat something else instead. Another marble rolls near her, which Ureion quickly hides and says she can do whatever she likes, crushing the marble under his foot. He then looks ahead and sees her standing still and asks what she wants to eat this time. As she chews, she wonders why that question comes so reflexively and thinks something seems to be distracting him from the food. He then suggests that maybe it is better if she holds on to the money. She panics, thinking she isn't asking him to buy anything for her, and quickly tells him not to treat her like a child. She then points to the statue of the howling wolf and asks about the cross on its back. He is surprised but explains that the wolf and cross are symbols of Bellacort because Loris, the god of peace and prosperity, often appears as a wolf. The wolf symbolizes the Bellacort royal family, descended from Loris, and the cross on its back represents the member of the royal family who inherits the most of Loris's divinity, that is, the king. She begins to acknowledge that it symbolizes him as the father of the nation, but he stops her, prompting her to retract and smile as she confirms that the statue indeed symbolizes him. As Ureion stares at Urenica, she thinks that he is finally looking at her, and although he doesn't appear much different than usual, he occasionally seems on edge, though she isn't sure if she is imagining it. He then asks why she keeps looking at him in that way, and she responds by asking how she is looking at him. He tells her she is looking like she is trying to figure something out, and she denies it. He says that is good, which annoys her, and she asks what he means by that. He explains that whenever she looks at him like that, something unexpected tends to happen. She finds it amusing and wonders if he now associates her with causing trouble. She admits she can be unpredictable but insists she is serious and feels neglected. He dismisses that claim as unfair, but since that is how she feels, he won't argue, and he asks what she wants to see next. She giggles and says she wants to see the wolf statue up close. He agrees, and she thinks that in this moment all he can see is her, which feels close to what she truly wants. He follows her while thinking that he can't let his guard down around her. When they get close to the statue, Urenica is amazed and thinks it is the perfect spot for a picture, imagining a photo with the wolf in view. Then she realizes they don't have cameras here. Ureion, seeing her so playful, thinks she must have been restless from staying in the palace. She tells him how different this place is from Levnne, describing how everything there is small, including the royal palace. She acknowledges he has seen that himself and asks what he thinks. He replies that it looks bite-sized, which she finds rude, insisting their palace isn't that small and that Bellacort's is just excessively large. He concedes with a vague agreement, which she finds unappealing. Then another marble rolls nearby, and Ureion wonders if it is another boundary stone, noting its unusual swirling dark aura and how many he has seen today, suspecting black magic. As Urenica continues sightseeing, Ureion thinks about the uses of boundary stones, either for trapping something or teleporting it, and how suspicious their surroundings have been, with magicians bumping into them and a growing sense of pursuit. He questions where this ominous feeling is coming from. When another stone rolls near, he concludes that he now has enough evidence to determine their intentions and knows who the target is. He grasps her hand tightly, and she, confused, calls out to him. He wonders who they think they can abduct. She asks why he has that look on his face, and he pulls her close to warn her. The stone behind her disappears, and though she doesn't understand, he tells her not to call him that in public and to watch where she walks. She looks back and says there is nothing there. Changing the subject, he points out a display of traditional crafts nearby and asks if she wants to see it. She excitedly agrees and asks a vendor about a pretty item, learning it is something for the hair. The vendor offers to put it on her if she removes her hood, which she eagerly agrees to, but Ureion stops her, thinking her pink hair is too distinctive. She pleads, wanting to try just once, but he refuses. She insists again, saying she won't know which one looks good otherwise. He whispers that he will have all of them sent to Berilia Palace, so she won't need to take her hood off. The vendor, hearing that, confirms the palace, and Ureion says he will buy everything. Urenica questions the extravagance, asking if he is overspending, and he claims he probably has the most money in Bellacort. The vendor thanks him, and Urenica remarks that while that might be true, money tends to circulate back around. Ureion thinks she misunderstands the saying. Then she notices a black marble among the accessories that resembles the ones from before. As it begins to glow, she feels drawn toward it and experiences a stinging pain. She stammers that it hurts and tells Ureion there is something wrong with that stone. When he asks which one, she points it out, confused because she hasn't intended to touch it, and says it feels like it is pulling her in. Ureion quickly warns her not to touch it and pulls her close, commenting that someone must have left those stones around, as they are scattered all over the streets. Urenica is startled, realizing she definitely doesn't imagine it this time. His demeanor totally changes. He instantaneously goes cold. Ureion picks up the strange marble. She urgently tells him not to touch that, but is shocked to see that it does nothing to Ureion. He is totally fine, but her finger is swollen. Ureion crushes the marble, saying such silly tricks, then grabs her hand and applies his divine power. She is thinking that she doesn't even touch that strange marble and wonders how this happens. After he applies his divine energy, the swelling vanishes. Then he mumbles the names Radin, Rugier, Selvier, and Eligar. She wonders about that name and notes she hasn't heard those other names, questioning whether they are also knights who directly report to Ureion. She then turns towards the horse, thinking Radin, wondering if the man standing next to Rode is one of the knights. She sees that he has been on guard about something the whole time and has even had 4 knights secretly follow them. She asks worriedly what is happening, and he says they need to get away from this place. She questions what he means, and he smirks, stating he sees a lot of rats today. She wonders about rats, doubting he is talking about actual rats, and then shudders, thinking it can't be, and that either, so follows them. She feels chills down her spine and quickly hugs Ureion in panic. He asks what the meaning of this is. As the crowd bustles around them, she says this means she likes him, Your Majesty. She thinks it is probably not a good thing that she keeps wanting to depend on him, but maybe it is because her body instinctively knows this is how she can feel better. She counts to 3 and then let go. As she backs away, she feels now healthy in both body and mind. Then she says they can go now. He murmurs to himself to seal off the plaza and for Radin to contact the Tower of Magic. Hearing that, she thinks his voice sounds so cold and wonders where his knights are, glancing around to find them. Then he picks her up and starts walking, reminding her that she has said earlier she wants to go to the temple. She asks what, and remembers the temple, then realizes that isn't what is important right now. She shouts that she thinks that is enough sightseeing and suggests maybe they can just return to the palace. He doesn't stop and quickly gets on his horse, shouting giddy up. She panics, saying he is speeding. As they reach the temple, one of the clergy sees the approaching horse and says horse riding is not permitted there and demands to know his name and why he is there. Ureion uncovers his head and tells the priest to move. The clergy panics and addresses him as Your Majesty, then asks who is with him. He replies coldly that it is none of his business. Urenica flinches, thinking she has never heard him talk like this and noting he sounds so angry, wondering why he is acting like this. As the priest feels pressured, he is speechless. Then Ureion says this is his guest and that she is someone who happens to be under Bellacort's protection. The priest replies with apologies and says he does not mean to be discourteous to an important guest. Then she replies with thank you, but Ureion races the horse. Later, while getting off, she asks if he really has to race off like that and says she doesn't know why he is in such a rush. He asks if she is all right. She replies with pardon and says yes, she is. He looks worried and says, is that so? She wonders what is going on. As she gets off the horse, she slumps. He catches her and says he knows this will happen. He pats her back and tells her to take a deep breath and then slowly breathe out. He says that it is not uncommon for people who have never stepped foot on the temple's grounds to feel this way and that she will have to get used to it. She thinks in her mind that it is an overwhelming amount of divine power and that she feels like a catfish that lives in the dirtiest riverbed their whole life and then one day suddenly finds itself dropped into extremely clean water. Ureion tells Urenica she will feel better soon and reminds her to breathe. After a few moments, she feels refreshed and completely fine, remarking that it is strange. Ureion explains that it is because she is feeling pure, unadulterated divinity and asks if she can walk, to which she responds that she can. He slips the robe off her, noting it must have felt stuffy, and she admits it does a little but adds that she now feels fine. He stares at her with a worried expression, making her blush as she finds it embarrassing how intensely he examines her, as if studying her from head to toe. She asks what he is doing, and then he takes her hand, saying he is checking it. She notes that her hand is all better from before and thinks that he isn't listening but figures he can look at it all he wants. He lets go of her hand and says he should have warned her not to go around touching everything she sees. She protests that she hasn't touched just anything but is drawn to the object because it feels like it is begging to be touched. He smiles briefly and then sighs, agreeing he can see how that might happen. She asks if he believes her, and he sarcastically replies that he does not. She looks at him and realizes he has the expression of someone who is pretending to agree, making her feel like he thinks she is a child. He asks again if the object draws her in, and although he looks like his usual self, she senses something is different. She calls out to him, but he tells her to go into the temple and find Thierry, who will be around and will be a familiar face to talk to. She questions what he will be doing, and he answers that he needs to check on something. She grabs his arm and reminds him that he has said he would be her hostage. She presses him to explain what he is checking on, pointing out that his behavior has been strange all day, from the sudden urgency to leave the alley to his constant glancing around and the current look in his eyes. She observes that he has been on high alert since they left the palace, more so than when he has joked about being kidnapped, and she begins to suspect the reason for all of it but stops short of saying Soleil's name. He appears more serious than she has ever seen him, and remarks that it is a shame she only notices things at times like these and that she is usually quite careless. She glares at him, feeling frustrated that he isn't taking her seriously. He explains he has seen a few things during their outing that shouldn't be there and decides to patrol the streets to address some unsavory elements, noting that it has been a while since he has done so. He gives the example of the magic orb she nearly touches earlier and mentions that there have been quite a few, making it dangerous for her to be outside. He concludes that it would be safer for her to stay at the temple, especially since he won't be at the palace. She accepts that he might not be suspecting Soleil, but feels sure it is her doing, though she has no proof and can't accuse her outright. She laments that she has no special skills to expose Soleil and will only get in the way, so she resolves to sit still and be more helpful by staying out of the way. She finds the situation frustrating and asks when he will return. He replies he will be back by the end of the day, and she tells him not to be late. He promises, and she warns him seriously, saying it will make her nervous if he doesn't return on time. He asks what he doesn't know, and she thinks to herself that she does know the plot of the original novel. She worries that if things don't go Soleil's way, she might try to harm Ureion instead of going after the child she wants. Out loud, she tells him nothing and simply urges him to come back safely and not get hurt. He brushes her hair and remarks that she likes to worry over nothing. She looks briefly unhappy, but then smiles, wishing he could understand even half of what she is feeling. After he leaves, she says aloud that he has left her alone, though he has mentioned Thierry will be nearby, and she figures spending time with Thierry is better than being alone. As she turns toward the steps, she thinks the real issue is the number of steps, wondering if they are meant for atonement. She questions how she is supposed to climb them, especially while wearing heels, and muses that Ureion will probably return before she manages to reach the top. Then someone calls out to her from behind, addressing her as Princess, so she turns. The person expresses surprise, saying they have wondered why His Majesty has been looking for them and asks what she is doing up there. Looking at Thierry, Urenica feels a wave of relief as he explains that the staircase she nearly climbs is only used when offerings are made to Loris, with the altar at the top, and because it is a sacred path walked by Loris himself, no one is allowed to step on it. She realizes Ureion has forgotten to mention something so important, and if Thierry doesn't arrive in time, she might unknowingly walk onto holy ground. Blushing, she turns to Thierry and asks how he knows where she is, and he says His Majesty has told him. She frowns, confused, since Ureion is with her the whole time. Thierry explains that those who serve Loris can communicate without speaking, and that King Ureion, having the strongest divine power in the land, can easily send messages like that. Urenica finally understands he hasn't been mumbling to himself earlier, and realizes the knights are holy knights of Loris. Thierry Thierry asks if she feels better, and she says yes, stretching her arms and noting it has been a long time since she has felt so energized. Thierry smiles, saying she probably feels better here than at the palace because there is nothing dangerous nearby. Still, he gently reminds her that some temple areas are off limits to outsiders, and she promises to behave, thinking he knows well that she hates boredom. Before she finds out he is a nominee for Archbishop, he has been her personal palace guide. She pauses and apologizes for being a bother, not just today, but before as well. Thierry laughs and tells her not to worry. He isn't that busy anyway. She thinks he is incredibly kind and wishes Ureion could be at least half as nice, then blushes, thinking Ureion would tease her for saying sorry. Something still feels off to her, and even though Ureion acts like everything is fine, she suspects something has happened. She even wonders if Soleil has placed black magic on the palace and holds her head. Thierry points to a roped-off path, explaining the gold rope marks the entrance to the priest's prayer room, which civilians can't enter, while the red rope marks the prayer room for outsiders. She blinks, having assumed the opposite. He says that beyond those rooms is the public prayer area, and she notices many nobles gathered there. Thierry explains this is the only place in the capital where people can pray directly to Loris, and both nobles and commoners share the same space. He invites her to come along, noting the large crowd. As they walk, she hears whispers. Someone mentions her pink hair, and another asks who she is. She stiffens, uncomfortable with being stared at, thinking that if DeKalb's father were there, she'd have something to hold on to. Thankfully, Thierry soon brings her to a quiet room, saying it is his study, and apologizes for not taking her to the worship room since it is too crowded. She thanks him and sits down, feeling relieved. He asks if she wants tea, and she quickly accepts, waving her hand and thinking about how everyone has stared at her. Thierry says it seems like she has gone out, and she confirms she's visited the capital with His Majesty, though something unexpected has happened. Thierry looks surprised that the king has gone with her himself, and she admits it just happens that way. As he gives her the tea, he mentions that when Ureion contacts him directly, he fears something is wrong, but is glad she is okay. She assures him that nothing serious has happened, though she isn't totally sure, as Ureion has seemed concerned. Thierry thinks for a moment while she drinks the tea and tells her it seems like the king really cares for her. She chokes in surprise and asks who says that. He clarifies that no one has told him directly, but he's noticed things and overheard nobles talking. She looks nervous and asks if there are rumors, and he admits it is just idle gossip tying her name to the king. She asks if the rumors are good or bad, and Thierry says he can't really say. If people believe there is something going on between her and the king, that is good. But if they think a strange woman has suddenly appeared in the palace, that is gonna be bad. She asks which one it is, and he remembers nobles gossiping that the king has locked her in a dungeon, while others say they have seen her freely walking around. One noblewoman even claims the king has brought his true bride from Lvovne, and another agrees, saying anyone is better than that snake of a woman. Thierry says it is probably the first version, which makes her smile in relief, happy that public opinion seems to be on her side. She then asks if he thinks there is any hope for her, and when he asks what she means, she clarifies, hope for a future with the king. Thierry is so surprised he almost spills his tea. She explains that her condition makes staying near the king best, and then shyly asks if he can help make His Majesty like her more.